Hello, horror lover. Are you ready for a long night of nightmares? Before we begin, I want to ask you to subscribe to the channel, and especially leave a comment telling me which city you're watching from. I'd love to know. Click the like button, all of this because the gentle hum of the refrigerator was the only sound in my dimly lit kitchen as I shuffled in, bleary-eyed and desperate for my morning coffee. The digital clock on the microwave blinked 6:17 a.m. Its green glow a stark contrast to the pre-dawn darkness outside my window. Anchorage's long winter nights were starting to wear on me, but I had a busy day ahead at the law firm where I worked as a paralegal. I reached for the coffee pot, my fingers brushing against the smooth, cool surface of the granite countertop. That's when I saw it. My hand froze midair, hovering above the coffee maker as my eyes locked onto the bizarre sight before me. There, on my usually pristine kitchen island, was an intricate pattern of paper clips. They were arranged in a perfect spiral, each clip linked to the next, forming an ever-tightening coil that ended in a small, precise circle at the center. The metallic sheen of the clips caught the soft light from above the stove, creating an almost hypnotic effect. I blinked hard, certain I was still half asleep and imagining things. But when I opened my eyes, the pattern remained, undisturbed and undeniably real. "What the hell?" I muttered, my voice sounding unnaturally loud in the quiet kitchen. I took a step closer, my heart beginning to race. I never left paper clips on the kitchen island. In fact, I couldn't remember the last time I'd even used a paperclip at home. My mind raced through possibilities. Had I sleepwalked? Had someone broken in? But nothing else seemed disturbed, and my security system hadn't been triggered. With trembling hands, I pulled out my phone and snapped a quick picture. I needed proof. Needed to know I wasn't losing my mind. The click of the camera seemed to break the spell, and I found myself able to move again. I reached out and touched one of the paper clips, half expecting it to disappear at my touch. But it was solid, cool against my fingertip. I jumped at the sudden blaring of my alarm from the bedroom, nearly dropping my phone. Taking a deep breath, I tried to calm my racing heart. "Get it together, Olivia," I said aloud, my voice shaky. "There's got to be a logical explanation for this." But even as I said it, a chill ran down my spine. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very, very wrong. I forced myself to go through the motions of my morning routine, but my mind kept wandering back to the paper clips. By the time I was dressed and ready for work, I had almost convinced myself it was nothing. A prank by a friend with a spare key, perhaps. Or maybe I had arranged them myself in a bout of insomnia and simply forgotten. As I grabbed my coat and headed for the door, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from my best friend, Sarah. "Hey, Liv, we still on for drinks tonight? You seemed pretty stressed yesterday." I hesitated before replying. Should I tell her about the paper clips? Would she think I was crazy? I decided against it, at least for now. "Yeah, definitely. See you at 7 at the Moose's Tooth." Her reply came quickly. "Perfect. Try not to let Johnson work you to death before then." I managed a small smile as I locked the door behind me. The brisk Alaskan air hit me like a slap to the face, momentarily clearing my head. As I walked to my car, crunching through the light dusting of snow that had fallen overnight, I tried to focus on the day ahead. I had a mountain of paperwork waiting for me at the office, and I couldn't afford to be distracted by whatever had happened this morning. The drive to work was a blur of snow-covered streets and early morning traffic. As I pulled into the parking lot of the law firm, I realized I had no memory of the journey. My mind had been entirely occupied with theories about the paperclip pattern, each one seeming more far-fetched than the last. I was so lost in thought that I nearly collided with my colleague, Mike, as I entered the building. "Whoa there, Liv," he exclaimed, steadying me with a hand on my arm. "You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." I forced a laugh, trying to sound normal. "Sorry, Mike, just a weird morning. Didn't sleep well." He nodded sympathetically. "I hear you. These long nights are killer. Want me to grab you a coffee from the break room?" "That would be amazing, thanks," I replied, grateful for his kindness. As I settled at my desk, I couldn't resist pulling out my phone and looking at the picture of the paperclips again. In the harsh fluorescent light of the office, it looked even more surreal. I zoomed in, studying the perfect symmetry of the pattern. How had this happened? "Here's your coffee." Mike's voice startled me, and I quickly locked my phone screen. "You sure you're okay, Liv? You seem really out of it." I took the coffee, wrapping my hands around the warm mug. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just, have you ever experienced something you couldn't explain? Something that seemed impossible?" Mike raised an eyebrow, leaning against my desk. "Like what? You see the Northern Lights doing the Macarena or something?" I laughed, despite myself. "No, nothing like that. Just, never mind. It's stupid." He shrugged. "Well, if you want to talk about it, I'm all ears. Sometimes the impossible stuff is the most interesting." As Mike walked away, I turned to my computer, determined to lose myself in work. But as the day wore on, I found my mind constantly drifting back to my kitchen and the eerie pattern I'd found there. By lunchtime, I was a bundle of nerves. I couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had happened, something that went beyond a simple, inexplicable arrangement of office supplies. I decided to call my sister Emma. She had always been the level-headed one in the family, and I desperately needed some of that rationality right now. I stepped outside, shivering in the cold as I dialed her number. She picked up on the third ring. "Liv, is everything okay? You never call during work hours." Emma's voice was tinged with concern. I took a deep breath. Something weird happened this morning, and I can't stop thinking about it." I explained about the paperclips, my voice growing more frantic as I described the perfect spiral, the impossibility of it all. There was a long pause when I finished. "Liv?" Emma finally said, her voice gentle. "Are you sure you didn't do this yourself? You've been under a lot of stress lately with this big case. Maybe you did it subconsciously to calm yourself down or something." I shook my head, even though she couldn't see me. "No, Em. I would remember something like that. It's not just that, though. It felt wrong somehow, like it wasn't supposed to be there." Another pause. "Okay, here's what we're going to do. You're going to finish your workday, then go have drinks with Sarah like you planned. Try to relax, okay? When you get home, check if anything else is out of place. If it is, call me immediately. If not, try to get some sleep. We'll figure this out, I promise." Her calm, methodical approach soothed me somewhat. "Okay. Yeah, okay. Thanks, Em." As I hung up and headed back inside, I felt a little better. Emma was right. I was probably overreacting. It was just paperclips after all. Nothing to be afraid of. But as I sat back down at my desk, a nagging thought wormed its way into my mind. What if it happened again? What if I went home to find more strange patterns, more inexplicable arrangements? The rest of the afternoon crawled by, each minute feeling like an hour. By the time 5 p.m. rolled around, I was a mess of anxiety and anticipation. I practically ran to my car, my mind already racing ahead to what I might find when I got home. As I drove, the streets of Anchorage blurred around me, the familiar buildings and snow-covered landscapes seeming somehow alien and threatening. The sun had long since set, and the city was bathed in the eerie glow of streetlights reflecting off the snow. I pulled into my driveway, my hands shaking as I turned off the engine. For a long moment, I just sat there, staring at my front door. What would I find inside? More patterns? Or worse, nothing at all, leaving me to question my own sanity. Taking a deep breath, I stepped out of the car. The cold air bit at my cheeks as I walked to the door, my keys jingling loudly in the quiet night. With one last moment of hesitation, I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The house was dark and silent. I flipped on the lights, my eyes darting around, searching for anything out of place. The kitchen looked normal, the island clear of any paperclips. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. But as I turned to hang up my coat, my gaze fell on the welcome mat. My heart stopped. There, arranged in a perfect spiral, were my shoes, every pair I owned, from my work heels to my running sneakers, lined up in a dizzying pattern that mirrored the paperclips from that morning. I stumbled backward, my back hitting the wall as I stared at the impossible scene before me. This was no coincidence, no trick of an overworked mind. This was real, and it was happening in my home. As the reality of the situation sank in, a cold fear gripped my heart. Whatever was causing this, whatever force was at work here, it wasn't going away, and I had no idea how to stop it. With trembling fingers, I pulled out my phone to call Emma, my eyes never leaving the spiral of shoes. As the phone rang, one thought echoed through my mind. This is only the beginning. The shrill ring of my alarm jolted me awake, my heart pounding as if I'd just run a marathon. For a blissful moment, I couldn't remember why I felt so anxious. Then it all came flooding back. The paperclips, the shoes, the inexplicable arrangements that had turned my home into a surreal nightmare. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. After discovering the shoe spiral last night, I'd called Emma in a panic. She'd talked me down, convinced me to take a sleeping pill and try to rest. "We'll figure it out in the morning," she'd promised. But now, in the harsh light of day, I felt no closer to understanding what was happening. With a deep breath, I forced myself out of bed. My legs felt like lead as I made my way to the bathroom, dreading what I might find. I pushed open the door, my hand shaking on the knob. "Oh God," I whispered, my voice barely audible. My toiletries were arranged in an intricate mandala pattern on the bathroom counter. Toothbrush, hairbrush, makeup brushes, and various bottles formed concentric circles, each item placed with surgical precision. In the center, my bottle of sleeping pills stood upright, a silent sentinel overseeing the bizarre display. I fumbled for my phone, nearly dropping it in my haste to take a picture. As I stared at the image on the screen, a hysterical laugh bubbled up in my throat. This couldn't be happening. It just couldn't. The buzz of my phone startled me. It was a text from Sarah. "Hey, you okay? You seemed pretty out of it at the bar last night." I'd completely forgotten about our meetup. The events at home had overshadowed everything else. I typed out a quick reply. "Yeah, just tired. Long week." As I hit send, another text came through, this time from Emma. "How are you feeling this morning? Any more strange occurrences?" I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. Should I tell her? Would she even believe me? After a moment's deliberation, I decided to be honest. It happened again. Bathroom this time. "Can you come over?" Her response was immediate. "On my way. Don't touch anything." I let out a shaky breath, relieved that I wouldn't have to face this alone. While I waited for Emma, I decided to document everything. I grabbed a notebook and began writing down every detail I could remember, from the first paperclip spiral to this morning's mandala. The doorbell rang just as I was finishing up. I practically ran to answer it, throwing the door open to reveal Emma's concerned face. "Liv, you look terrible," she said by way of greeting, pulling me into a tight hug. I clung to her, feeling tears prick at the corners of my eyes. I'm scared. I don't understand what's happening." She pulled back, her hands on my shoulders. "Show me everything. We'll figure this out together, okay?" I nodded, leading her through the house. We started in the kitchen, where the paperclips had been that first morning. Then to the entryway where I'd found the shoe spiral. Finally, I brought her to the bathroom. Emma's sharp intake of breath echoed in the tiled room.
"Jesus, Liv. I don't even know what to say." "You believe me now?" I asked, hating how small and scared my voice sounded. She nodded slowly, her eyes never leaving the mandala. "Yeah, I believe you. This isn't something you could have done in your sleep. It's too precise." We spent the next hour going over every inch of my house, looking for any other disturbances or clues. But apart from the 3 incidents, everything else seemed normal. "Okay," Emma said finally, sitting down at my kitchen table. "Let's think this through logically. When did this start?
I consulted my notes. 3 days ago. Tuesday morning was the first time I noticed anything. And has anything unusual happened recently? Any new people in your life? Any strange experiences? I shook my head. No, nothing. My life's been boringly normal. Work, home, occasional drinks with friends. That's it. Emma tapped her fingers on the table, her brow furrowed in thought. What about stress? You mentioned that big case at work. Could this be some kind of, I don't know, stress-induced hallucination? That's what I thought at first, I admitted. But Em, you've seen it now too. Unless we're both hallucinating the exact same thing. No, you're right. This is real. I don't know how to explain it. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the situation pressing down on us. Finally, Emma spoke up. I think you need to set up cameras, she said. If this happens again, we need to see how it's happening. The thought sent a chill down my spine. You mean record myself while I'm sleeping? What if I see something I don't want to see? Emma reached across the table, squeezing my hand. Liv, we need answers. This can't go on. You can't live like this, jumping at shadows and afraid to go to sleep. I knew she was right, but the idea terrified me. What if the cameras caught something supernatural? Or worse, what if they showed me doing these things myself, unaware and unseeing? Okay, I said finally. I'll do it. But Ishiru, will you stay with me tonight? I don't want to be alone. Emma's face softened. Of course. We'll face this together, whatever it is. We spent the rest of the day setting up cameras in my bedroom, bathroom, and living areas. By the time we finished, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the rooms. As we sat down to a dinner of hastily ordered pizza, Emma tried to lighten the mood. You know, if this turns out to be some elaborate prank, I'm going to kill you for making me waste a Saturday setting up spy cameras. I managed a weak smile. Trust me, I wish it was a prank. That night, as we prepared for bed, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Not just by the cameras, but by something else. Something that was using my home as its canvas, creating art I couldn't understand. Try to relax, Emma said as she settled onto the air mattress we'd set up in my room. Whatever happens, we'll deal with it in the morning. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. As I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I found myself both dreading and anticipating what the morning might bring. Would there be another pattern? Another impossible arrangement that defied explanation? Sleep was elusive, coming in fits and starts. Every creak of the house, every whisper of wind outside, had me on edge. When my alarm finally went off, I realized I'd been awake for hours, watching the gradual lightening of the sky through my window. Emma stirred on the air mattress. Anything? She asked, her voice thick with sleep. I took a deep breath. I don't know. I haven't looked yet. We got up together, moving cautiously through the house. Everything seemed normal at first glance. The bathroom was untouched, the living room in order. But as we entered the kitchen, we both stopped short. There on the kitchen table was my collection of seashells. I'd gathered them over years of vacations, each one a memory of a different beach, a different time. Now they were arranged in a complex mandala, more intricate than anything we'd seen before. Spiral arms of tiny cowries radiated out from a center of larger conchas and whelks. The pattern was mesmerizing, beautiful in its complexity. Oh my God, Emma breathed. Liv, this is impossible, I finished for her. This is impossible. We stood there, staring at the seashell mandala for what felt like hours. Finally, Emma shook herself out of her trance. The cameras, she said. We need to check the footage. My hands shook as I retrieved my laptop, pulling up the security camera feed. We fast-forwarded through hours of uneventful footage, watching the dark, still rooms. And then, at exactly 3:33 a.m., we saw it. A figure moved into the kitchen. It was me, but not me. My eyes were open but unseeing, my movements fluid but purposeful. We watched in stunned silence as I methodically arranged the seashells, my hands moving with inhuman precision. The entire process took exactly 33 minutes. At 4:06 a.m. I stood back, surveyed my work with blank eyes, and then walked back to bed as if nothing had happened. Emma and I sat in shocked silence, the implications of what we'd just seen sinking in. "Liv," Emma said finally, her voice barely above a whisper, "I think we need to get you some help." I nodded numbly, my eyes still fixed on the screen. The truth was undeniable now, captured in high definition. I was the one creating these patterns, these impossible arrangements. But why? And how? As the questions swirled in my mind, one thing became crystal clear. This was only the beginning of a journey that would challenge everything I thought I knew about myself, about reality, and about the thin line between the conscious and unconscious mind. With trembling fingers, I reached for my phone. It was time to call for professional help. Whatever was happening to me, whatever force was driving me to create these eerie masterpieces in my sleep, I couldn't face it alone anymore. As I dialed the number for a local sleep specialist, I caught sight of my reflection in the kitchen window. For a moment, just a moment, I could have sworn I saw a flicker of something in my eyes, a knowledge, a purpose that was entirely alien to me. I blinked, and it was gone, but the unease remained, a constant companion as I stepped into the unknown, seeking answers to questions I never thought I'd have to ask. The waiting room of Dr. Amelia Chen's sleep clinic was eerily quiet, save for the soft ticking of a wall clock and the occasional rustle of pages as I fidgeted with an outdated magazine. The sterile smell of disinfectant hung in the air, doing little to calm my frayed nerves. I'd been here for nearly an hour, my appointment delayed due to an emergency with another patient. Each passing minute felt like an eternity, my mind racing with the possibilities of what Dr. Chen might say. "Ms. Olivia Reeves?" A nurse called from the doorway, startling me out of my anxious reverie. I stood up, my legs feeling weak beneath me. "That's me," I managed to croak out. The nurse smiled kindly. "Dr. Chen will see you now. Please follow me." As we walked down the hallway, the walls lined with posters about sleep disorders and circadian rhythms, I couldn't help but wonder if any of them could explain what was happening to me. Somehow, I doubted that arranging household items into intricate patterns while sleepwalking was a common diagnosis. Dr. Chen's office was warm and inviting, a stark contrast to the clinical waiting area. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with medical texts and what looked like ancient tomes on dream interpretation. The doctor herself sat behind a large oak desk, her salt and pepper hair pulled back into a neat bun. "Ms. Reeves, please have a seat," she said, gesturing to a comfortable-looking armchair across from her. "I understand you've been experiencing some unusual sleep-related incidents?" I sank into the chair, taking a deep breath. "That's one way to put it, Dr. Chen. I'm not even sure where to begin." She leaned forward, her eyes kind but analytical. "Why don't you start from the beginning? Tell me about the first time you noticed something was amiss." And so I did. I told her about the paper clips, the shoes, the bathroom mandala, and finally the seashells. As I spoke, I pulled out my phone, showing her the pictures I'd taken of each incident. Dr. Chen's expression remained neutral, but I saw her eyebrows raise slightly as she examined the images. "And you have no recollection of creating these arrangements?" she asked when I finished. I shook my head. "None. But we set up cameras and—" I swallowed hard, the memory of watching myself move like a puppet on strings still fresh in my mind. "We saw me doing it, but it wasn't like normal sleepwalking. It was so precise, so deliberate." Dr. Chen nodded slowly, jotting down notes on a pad. "Olivia, what you're describing is indeed unusual. Sleepwalking, or somnambulism, is typically characterized by much simpler actions: walking around, perhaps moving objects, but nothing as complex as what you've shown me. So what does that mean? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Am I losing my mind? Dr. Chen's eyes softened. No, Olivia. I don't believe you're losing your mind. And what you're experiencing is certainly atypical, but it doesn't necessarily indicate a mental health crisis. However, I would like to run some tests to rule out any underlying neurological issues. She proceeded to explain the battery of tests she wanted to perform, an MRI, an EEG, and a full sleep study. As she spoke, I felt a mix of relief and apprehension. On one hand, I was grateful that she was taking me seriously. On the other, the prospect of undergoing all these tests was daunting. There's one more thing, I said as she finished outlining the plan. The patterns, they feel meaningful somehow, like they're trying to tell me something. Is that normal? Dr. Chen leaned back in her chair, her expression thoughtful. The human mind is remarkably complex, Olivia. It's not uncommon for individuals to ascribe meaning to patterns, especially in times of stress or uncertainty. However, given the unusual nature of your experiences, I wouldn't dismiss these feelings outright. They could be your subconscious trying to communicate something. I left Dr. Chen's office with a stack of paperwork and appointments scheduled for the following week. As I drove home, my mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. Part of me felt relieved to be taking concrete steps towards understanding what was happening. But another part of me was terrified of what we might discover. When I arrived home, I found Emma waiting on my front porch, a bag of groceries at her feet. I thought you might need some company, she said as I approached. And some actual food. You can't live on takeout and fear, you know. I managed a weak smile. Thanks, Em. I don't know what I'd do without you. As we prepared dinner together, a simple pasta dish that filled the kitchen with the comforting aroma of garlic and herbs. I filled Emma in on my appointment with Dr. Chen. So what do we do now? Emma asked as we sat down to eat. Just wait for the test results? I twirled pasta around my fork, my appetite suddenly gone. I don't know if I can just sit and wait, Em. These patterns, they're happening for a reason. I can feel it. I need to understand why. Emma's brow furrowed. Liv, be careful. You heard what Dr. Chen said about ascribing meaning to patterns. This could all just be a weird manifestation of stress. But what if it's not? I countered, pushing my plate away. What if there's something more going on here, something, I don't know, beyond scientific explanation? Emma sighed. Okay. Let's say for a moment that these patterns do mean something. Where do we even start trying to decipher them? I got up from the table, walking over to the bookshelf in my living room. My fingers trailed along the spines until they landed on an old, leather-bound book, a gift from my grandmother years ago. The symbolism of shapes and patterns in world cultures, I read aloud. Emma raised an eyebrow. You're not serious. Do you have a better idea? I asked, already flipping through the pages. For the next few hours, we pored over the book, comparing the patterns I'd photographed to various cultural symbols and sacred geometries. Some similarities emerged. The spiral of paper clips resembled certain Celtic designs, while the seashell mandala bore a striking resemblance to Tibetan sand paintings. This is fascinating, I murmured, my eyes burning from strain, but my mind buzzing with excitement. But what does it all mean? Why these specific patterns? Emma yawned, stretching her arms above her head. I don't know, Liv, but it's late, and we're both exhausted. Maybe we should call it a night and pick this up tomorrow with fresh eyes. I nodded reluctantly, knowing she was right, but loath to stop now that we seemed to be onto something. As Emma prepared to leave, a thought struck me. Em, I said, my voice hesitant, would you mind staying over again? Just in case? Her expression softened. Of course. Let me just grab my overnight bag from the car. That night, as I lay in bed listening to Emma's soft breathing from the air mattress, my mind raced with possibilities. What if these patterns were more than just random arrangements? What if they were messages, coded in a language I didn't yet understand? I must have drifted off at some point because the next thing I knew, I was standing in my living room, surrounded by books. They were floating in the air, their pages fluttering as if caught in an invisible breeze. In the center of the room, the books began to arrange themselves into a complex, three-dimensional structure. I watched, transfixed, as the structure took shape. It looked like a DNA double helix, but instead of base pairs, there were open books connecting the spiraling strands. As I stepped closer, I could see that each book was open to a page with a different symbol. Some I recognized from my research earlier, others completely foreign to me. "What are you trying to tell me?" I whispered to the empty room. Suddenly, one book detached itself from the structure and flew towards me. It hovered in front of my face, its pages turning rapidly until it settled on an image of an ancient cave painting. The painting depicted a human figure surrounded by swirling patterns, eerily similar to the ones I'd been creating in my sleep. I reached out to touch the page, and as my fingers made contact, a jolt of electricity seemed to course through my body. I gasped, my eyes flying open. I was back in my bed, my heart pounding. The room was dark and still, no floating books in sight. But the image from my dream remained vivid in my mind. Without thinking, I grabbed my phone from the nightstand and opened my notes app. My fingers flew across the keyboard as I described every detail of the dream, the DNA structure, the symbols, the cave painting. As I wrote, a sense of purpose filled me. This wasn't just a dream. It was a clue. "Liv?" Emma's groggy voice came from the floor. "What are you doing? It's 3 a.m. I looked up from my phone, a mix of excitement and trepidation coursing through me. I think I just had a breakthrough. These patterns, these arrangements, they're not random. They're part of something bigger, something ancient." Emma sat up, rubbing her eyes. "Liv, it was just a dream. You can't—" "No." I cut her off, my voice firm. "This is real, Em. I can feel it. And I'm going to figure out what it means, with or without help from doctors or dream books, or anyone else." As I said the words, I felt a shift within me. The fear that had been my constant companion since this all began was still there, but it was overshadowed by a new emotion: determination. Whatever force was at work here, whatever message was trying to break through, I was going to decipher it. I looked at Emma, seeing the concern in her eyes. "I know this sounds crazy," I said softly, "but I need you to trust me. Something is happening to me, something important, and I have to see it through." Emma was silent for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Okay, Liv. I don't understand it, but I'm with you. Whatever this is, we'll figure it out together." As the first light of dawn began to creep through my window, I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. The patterns that had once terrified me now felt like breadcrumbs leading me towards a truth I couldn't yet fathom. And as I sat there, surrounded by the quiet of early morning and the steadfast presence of my sister, I knew that this was only the beginning of a journey that would change everything. The soft hum of medical equipment filled the air as I lay perfectly still inside the MRI machine. The narrow tube felt suffocating, and I fought the urge to panic. I focused on my breathing, trying to ignore the loud, rhythmic thumping of the machine as it scanned my brain. "You're doing great, Olivia." Dr. Chen's voice came through the intercom. "Just a few more minutes." I closed my eyes, my mind drifting to the events of the past week. The battery of tests Dr. Chen had ordered, blood work, EEG, and now this MRI, had consumed my days. Nights were a different story. The patterns continued, each more intricate than the last. My home had become a gallery of impossible arrangements, books stacked in perfect fractals, kitchen utensils forming complex geometric shapes, even my clothes woven into tapestries of color and texture. Emma had been my rock through it all, documenting each new creation with a mixture of awe and concern. We'd spent countless hours researching symbols and patterns, trying to decipher the meaning behind it all. But the more we learned, the more questions we had. The MRI finally ended, and I was slid out of the machine, feeling drained and claustrophobic. "You did well," Dr. Chen said as she helped me sit up. "We'll have the results in a few days. In the meantime, I'd like you to come in for the sleep study tonight. Is that still okay with you?" I nodded, my throat dry. "Yes, I'll be there. Do you think you'll find anything?" Dr. Chen's expression was carefully neutral. "Let's not jump to conclusions, Olivia. We'll analyze all the data and then discuss our findings. Try to rest until then." Rest. The word almost made me laugh. Rest had become a foreign concept, my nights filled with unconscious activity and my days consumed by the quest for answers. As I left the hospital, my phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "How did it go? Want to grab lunch?" We met at a small cafe near my apartment. Emma was already there when I arrived, a steaming mug of coffee in front of her and a concerned look on her face. "You look exhausted," she said, as I slumped into the chair across from her. I managed a weak smile. "Thanks. You really know how to make a girl feel special." Emma rolled her eyes, but I could see the worry behind her attempt at normalcy. "Seriously, Liv, how are you holding up?" I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "I don't know, Em. I feel like I'm going crazy. These tests, the patterns, the research, it's all becoming too much. And yet, Emma prompted. And yet I can't stop. It's like there's this force driving me forward, pushing me to understand. I know it sounds insane, but I feel like I'm on the verge of something big." Emma reached across the table, squeezing my hand. "It doesn't sound insane. Well, okay, maybe a little. But I've seen what's happening, Liv. Something is going on, and we'll figure it out together." As we ate, I filled Emma in on the upcoming sleep study. "Dr. Chen wants me there tonight. They're going to monitor my brain activity while I sleep." "Do you want me to come with you?" Emma asked. I shook my head. "No, I'll be fine. But could you check on my apartment? Just in case? In case you redecorate in your sleep again?" Emma finished with a small smile. "Of course, I'll document anything new." That night I found myself in a small, sterile room at the sleep clinic. Electrodes were attached to my scalp, chest, and limbs, wires snaking out from under my hospital gown. A nurse named Mark finished setting up the equipment, his movements efficient but gentle. "All right, Ms. Reeves, we're all set," he said, stepping back. "Try to relax and sleep as normally as you can. We'll be monitoring you throughout the night." I nodded, settling back against the pillows. What if I start sleepwalking?" Mark smiled reassuringly. "Don't worry. We're prepared for that. Your safety is our top priority. Just try to get some rest." As the lights dimmed and Mark left the room, I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing. What would they see tonight? Would I create another pattern? And if I did, what would it mean? Sleep came fitfully, my dreams a swirling mess of symbols and shapes. I was vaguely aware of movement, of my body acting without my conscious control, but it all felt distant, like watching a movie of someone else's life. I was jolted awake by a commotion in the room. Bright lights suddenly flared on, and I blinked, disoriented. Dr. Chen was there, along with several nurses, all staring at me with a mixture of awe and confusion. What's happening?" I mumbled, trying to sit up. That's when I saw it. The entire room had been transformed. The medical equipment, the furniture, even the electrodes that had been attached to me. Everything was arranged in a massive, complex pattern. It sprawled across the floor, up the walls, and onto the ceiling, a three-dimensional mandala that seemed to pulse with an inner energy. "Oh my God," I whispered, my heart racing. Did I do this?" Dr. Chen stepped forward, her face pale. "Olivia, I've never seen anything like this in my entire career. The level of precision, the complexity, it's unprecedented." I looked down at my hands, half expecting to see them covered in blood or bruises from the exertion. but they were clean, unmarked. How long was I asleep? About 4 hours, one of the nurses supplied. We watched it happen on the monitors. It was incredible. Dr. Chen cleared her throat, visibly trying to regain her professional composure. Olivia, I need you to remain calm. We're going to run some additional tests now that you're awake. Can you tell me how you're feeling? I took a moment to assess myself. Despite the shocking scene around me, I felt good, energized even. I feel fine, I said, surprise coloring my voice. Better than fine, actually. I feel clear. Over the next hour, I was subjected to a barrage of tests. Cognitive assessments, reflex examinations, more brain scans. Through it all, I couldn't take my eyes off the pattern I'd created. It felt familiar somehow, like a language I could almost understand. As dawn broke, Dr. Chen finally sat down with me, a thick file in her hands. Olivia, I've been reviewing all of your test results, including the brain scans from last night. What I'm about to tell you is, well, it's going to sound incredible. I leaned forward, my heart pounding. What is it? What did you find? Dr. Chen took a deep breath. Your brain activity during these episodes is unlike anything we've ever seen. It's as if your entire brain lights up at once, operating at a level of synchronicity that shouldn't be possible. And these patterns you're creating? They bear a striking resemblance to certain mathematical concepts, fractal geometry, chaos theory, even some principles of quantum mechanics. I stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. What does that mean? Am I sick? Dr. Chen shook her head. No, Olivia, you're not sick. In fact, by all measures, you're in perfect health. But what's happening to you? It's beyond our current scientific understanding. It's as if your unconscious mind has tapped into some kind of universal pattern language. The room seemed to spin around me as the implications of her words sank in. So what do we do now? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Chen leaned back, a mix of excitement and trepidation in her eyes. Now, Olivia, we try to understand. What you're experiencing could revolutionize our understanding of the human brain, of consciousness itself. With your permission, I'd like to bring in some colleagues, mathematicians, physicists, even some experts in ancient symbolism. We need to approach this from every angle. I nodded slowly, feeling overwhelmed but also strangely exhilarated. Okay, yes, let's do it. As I left the sleep clinic later that morning, my mind was reeling. I pulled out my phone to call Emma, but paused as a notification caught my eye. It was a news alert. Strange patterns appearing worldwide, experts baffled. With shaking hands, I opened the article. Images flooded my screen. Crop circles in England, sand formations in the Sahara, even ice structures in Antarctica. All bore an uncanny resemblance to the patterns I'd been creating. As I stared at my phone, a chill ran down my spine. Whatever was happening to me, it wasn't isolated. It was global. And somehow, I was at the center of it all. I took a deep breath, squaring my shoulders. The fear and confusion of the past weeks were still there, but they were overshadowed now by a sense of purpose. Whatever this was, whatever it meant, I was going to see it through. With renewed determination, I dialed Emma's number. As it rang, I looked up at the sky, a strange sense of connection washing over me. The clouds above seemed to swirl in familiar patterns, echoing the designs I'd created in my sleep. Hello? Emma's voice came through the phone. Em, I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. You're not going to believe what just happened. And I think this is bigger than we ever imagined. As I began to recount the events of the night, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. A door had been opened, a veil lifted, and on the other side lay answers to questions I hadn't even known to ask. Whatever came next, I was ready to face it, not just for myself, but for all of humanity. The patterns were calling, and I had no choice but to answer. The conference room at Anchorage University was packed to capacity, a palpable buzz of excitement and tension filling the air. I sat at the head of the long table, feeling like a specimen under a microscope, as the assembled experts studied me with barely concealed fascination. Dr. Chen sat to my right, a reassuring presence amidst the sea of unfamiliar faces. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," Dr. Chen began, her voice cutting through the murmur of conversation. "As I explained in my emails, we're dealing with a phenomenon that defies our current understanding of neuroscience and human capability." She nodded to me, and I took a deep breath before speaking. "My name is Olivia Reeves. For the past few weeks I've been creating things in my sleep. Patterns, arrangements. At first it was small, paper clips, shoes, but it's escalated. The night before last I rearranged an entire sleep clinic room into a three-dimensional mandala." A ripple of excitement went through the room. A man with wild gray hair and thick glasses leaned forward. "Ms. Reeves, I'm Dr. Alexander Volkov, theoretical physicist. These patterns you're creating, have you noticed any mathematical consistency? Any recurring elements?" I nodded, pulling out my phone to show the photos Emma and I had taken. "They seem to incorporate elements of fractal geometry, and there are similarities to some ancient symbols we've researched." A woman with long silver hair tied back in a braid spoke up next. "Fascinating. I'm Dr. Ilara Moonstone, expert in ancient symbolism and comparative mythology. Ms. Reeves, have you experienced any other changes? Visions, perhaps, or a sense of expanded consciousness?" I hesitated, feeling suddenly vulnerable. I've been having dreams. Vivid ones, filled with symbols and patterns. And sometimes when I'm awake, I feel like I can almost understand them. Like they're a language I'm on the verge of deciphering. The room erupted into excited chatter. Dr. Chen raised her hand for silence. "Please, let's approach this systematically. Dr. Volkov, Dr. Moonstone, what are your initial thoughts?" Dr. Volkov adjusted his glasses, his eyes bright with excitement. "From a physics standpoint, this is extraordinary. The patterns Ms. Reeves is creating seem to echo some of the most fundamental structures of the universe. From the microscopic world of quantum mechanics to the cosmic scale of galaxy formation. It's as if she's tapping into some kind of universal pattern language." Dr. Moonstone nodded enthusiastically. "Yes. And from a mythological perspective, this resonates with ancient concepts of divine inspiration or cosmic consciousness. Many cultures have stories of individuals who could access higher realms of knowledge through dreams or altered states." As they spoke, I felt a strange mix of relief and apprehension. On one hand, it was comforting to know that what I was experiencing wasn't completely unprecedented. On the other, the scale of what they were suggesting was overwhelming. A stern-looking man in a crisp suit cleared his throat. "This is all very interesting, but we need to consider the practical implications. I'm Dr. Richard Stern, neuroscientist and ethicist. Ms. Reeves, have you considered the potential dangers of what's happening to you? The strain on your mind and body?" I swallowed hard. I haven't really had time to think about it. Everything's been happening so fast." Dr. Stern's expression softened slightly. "I understand, but we need to proceed with caution. Your well-being should be our primary concern." Dr. Chen nodded. "Agreed, which is why I've asked you all here. We need to study this phenomenon from every angle, but always with Olivia's safety and consent as our top priority." The discussion continued for hours, each expert offering their perspective and proposing various tests and experiments. By the time we broke for lunch, my head was spinning with terms like quantum entanglement, archetypal symbolism, and neuroplasticity. As the room emptied, Dr. Chen approached me. "How are you holding up, Olivia?" I managed a weak smile. "It's a lot to take in. I feel like I've gone from being a normal person to some kind of scientific anomaly overnight." She squeezed my shoulder gently. "You're still you, Olivia. We're just trying to understand what's happening. Remember, you're in control here. If at any point you want to stop or take a break, just say the word." I nodded gratefully. "Thanks, Dr. Chen. I appreciate that." As we made our way to the cafeteria, my phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "How's it going? Do you need me to come rescue you from the mad scientists?" I chuckled, typing back, "So far so good. No dissections planned, yet." The afternoon session was more focused, with each expert proposing specific tests and studies. Dr. Volkov wanted to analyze the mathematical properties of my patterns using advanced computer modeling. Dr. Moonstone suggested comparing my creations to ancient symbols from various cultures. Dr. Stern insisted on regular psychological evaluations and stress tests. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the conference room, Dr. Chen called the meeting to a close. "Thank you all for your input. We'll compile a comprehensive study plan and reconvene in a few days. Olivia, do you have any questions or concerns?" I took a deep breath, looking around the room at the eager faces. "Just one. What do you all think this means? Not just for me, but in a bigger sense?" A heavy silence fell over the room. Finally, Dr. Volkov spoke, his voice uncharacteristically soft. "Ms. Reeves, what you're experiencing, it could be the key to understanding the very fabric of reality. The patterns you're creating, they're not just beautiful or complex. They might be a window into the fundamental structure of the universe." Dr. Moonstone nodded, her eyes shining. "And from a spiritual or philosophical perspective, this could revolutionize our understanding of consciousness, of human potential. You might be accessing a level of awareness that most of us can only dream of." Dr. Stern cleared his throat. "While I share my colleagues' excitement, I must stress again the need for caution. We're in uncharted territory here. The implications, both for you personally and for society at large, are profound and potentially dangerous." As I left the university and stepped into the cool Alaskan evening, my mind was reeling. The weight of what was happening, of what it could mean, felt almost crushing. I found myself walking aimlessly, barely noticing the familiar streets of Anchorage as I tried to process everything I'd heard. Without realizing it, I'd made my way to a small park near my apartment. I sat heavily on a bench watching as the last rays of sunlight painted the sky in shades of pink and orange. The trees swayed gently in the breeze, their leaves forming intricate patterns that seemed to dance before my eyes. "Olivia." A familiar voice jolted me from my reverie. I looked up to see Emma approaching, concern etched on her face. "I've been trying to call you. Are you okay?" I hadn't even noticed my phone buzzing. "Em? What are you doing here?" She sat down beside me, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. "You weren't answering, and I got worried. I figured you might come here to clear your head. How did it go?" I leaned into her embrace, suddenly overwhelmed by emotion. It was intense. They have all these theories, all these ideas about what might be happening, but nobody really knows for sure. Emma was quiet for a moment, just holding me. Finally, she spoke. "What do you think, Liv? What does your gut tell you?" I closed my eyes, focusing on the sensation of the pattern swirling in my mind. I think this is real, Em, and it's big, bigger than me, bigger than anything I could have imagined, and I'm terrified." Emma squeezed me tighter. "It's okay to be scared, Liv, this is huge, but you're not alone, okay? I'm here, and we'll figure this out together." As we sat there, the sky darkening above us, I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. The patterns in my mind seemed to align with the world around me. The swaying trees, the twinkling stars emerging in the twilight, even the distant hum of the city. For a moment, just a moment, it all made sense. "Em," I said softly, "I think I need to do this, to see it through wherever it leads. It's scary and it's overwhelming, but I think it's important, not just for me, but For everyone. Emma nodded, a small smile on her face. I know, and I'll be with you every step of the way. As we walked back to my apartment, hand in hand, I felt a mix of trepidation and excitement for what lay ahead. The patterns were calling, louder than ever, and I was finally ready to answer. That night, as I drifted off to sleep, I didn't fight the familiar sensation of my body moving without my conscious control. Instead, I embraced it, curious to see what my unconscious mind would create this time. As the world faded away, I had the distinct feeling that I was on the brink of something monumental, a discovery that could change everything. The last thought that flitted through my mind before sleep claimed me was a quote I'd once read. The universe is not only stranger than we imagine, it is stranger than we can imagine. I was about to find out just how true that was. The soft glow of my laptop screen illuminated the dim living room as I pored over yet another research paper. Outside, the Alaskan winter night pressed against the windows, the darkness broken only by the occasional flurry of snow caught in the streetlights. It was well past midnight, but sleep seemed like a distant concept these days. My eyes burned as I scrolled through dense paragraphs about quantum entanglement and consciousness. Dr. Vol5 had sent over a stack of articles insisting they might help me understand what was happening to me. So far, they'd only succeeded in making my head spin. A soft knock at the door startled me out of my concentration. I glanced at the clock, 2:17 a.m. Who could it be at this hour? Cautiously, I approached the door, peering through the peephole. To my surprise, I saw Emma standing there, looking exhausted, but determined. I opened the door, confusion evident in my voice. Em, what are you doing here? It's the middle of the night. She pushed past me, shrugging off her snow-dusted coat. I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about you, about all of this. I had to come check on you. Her eyes fell on my laptop and the scattered papers around it. Have you slept at all? I ran a hand through my disheveled hair, suddenly aware of how tired I felt. I'm not sure. I've been trying to make sense of all this research. Emma's face softened with concern. Liv, you can't keep going like this. You're going to burn out. I know. I sighed, collapsing onto the couch. But every time I close my eyes, the patterns are there. It's like they're trying to tell me something, and if I just work hard enough, I'll figure it out. Emma sat down next to me, her voice gentle but firm. And what good will you be to anyone if you drive yourself crazy in the process? You need rest, Liv. Real rest. I knew she was right, but the thought of sleeping, of surrendering to the patterns, filled me with a mix of anticipation and dread. I'm scared, Em, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. What if I lose myself in there? What if I can't come back? Emma wrapped an arm around me, pulling me close. That's not going to happen. You're stronger than that. And I'm here, okay? I'll watch over you. Exhaustion finally overtaking me, I nodded. As I drifted off to sleep, I felt Emma drape a blanket over me, her presence a comforting anchor in the swirling sea of my thoughts. The dream came swiftly, more vivid than ever before. I found myself standing in a vast, empty space, surrounded by swirling patterns of light. They danced around me, forming complex geometries that seemed to pulse with life and meaning. A voice, neither male nor female, echoed through the space. Olivia, you're finally ready to listen. I spun around, trying to locate the source of the voice. Who are you? What's happening to me? The patterns coalesced into a vaguely humanoid shape. We are the patterns. We've always been here, in the fabric of reality itself, but few have been able to perceive us, let alone communicate with us. But why me? I asked, my voice trembling. Why now? The figure seemed to shimmer, its form constantly shifting. You are at a nexus point, Olivia, a convergence of consciousness and quantum possibility. Your stress, your searching, it opened a door that most keep firmly shut. As the figure spoke, images flashed through my mind. My long hours at work, the pressure I put on myself to succeed, the constant feeling that I was missing something important in life. Each memory was accompanied by a corresponding pattern, as if my experiences were being translated into this strange universal language. Your patterns, I said, realization dawning. They're not just random creations, they're messages. The figure nodded, or at least I thought it did. Its form was hard to pin down. Each pattern is a key, unlocking a deeper understanding of reality. But be warned, Olivia, this knowledge comes at a price. The more you understand, the more you will be changed by it. I felt a surge of determination. I want to understand. I need to. The figure seemed to smile, though it had no discernible face. Then let us begin. What followed was a torrent of information, flooding into my mind faster than I could process. I saw the intricate dance of subatomic particles, the vast webs of dark matter connecting galaxies, the subtle interplay of thought and reality. Each concept was represented by a unique pattern, burning itself into my consciousness. I don't know how long I stood there, absorbing this cosmic download. It could have been minutes or millennia. But eventually the flow of information slowed, and I found myself gasping for breath, my mind reeling. The figure of light regarded me silently for a moment. You've taken the first step, Olivia. But remember, with great knowledge comes great responsibility. Use what you've learned wisely. Before I could ask any more questions, the dream began to fade. The last thing I saw was the figure dissolving into a shower of intricate patterns, each one a piece of the puzzle I was just beginning to understand. I woke with a start, my heart pounding. The living room was bathed in the soft light of dawn, and Emma was asleep in the armchair across from me, a book fallen open on her lap. But something was different. As I looked around the room, I could see patterns everywhere, in the grain of the wooden floor, in the way the light filtered through the curtains, even in the rise and fall of Emma's chest as she breathed. More than that, I could understand them. Each pattern was a piece of information, telling me about the fundamental nature of what I was seeing. It was overwhelming, beautiful, and terrifying all at once. "Em," I said softly, my voice shaking. "Emma, wake up." She stirred, blinking sleepily. "Liv? What's wrong? Did you have another episode?" I shook my head, tears forming in my eyes. "No, I had a dream. But it wasn't just a dream. Em, I can see them. The patterns. They're everywhere, and I can understand them." Emma sat up straight, fully awake now. "What do you mean you can understand them?" I tried to explain, pointing out the patterns I could see in the room, describing how each one carried information about the nature of reality. As I spoke, I could see the concern growing on Emma's face. "Liv," she said cautiously, "this sounds intense. Maybe we should call Dr. Chen." I nodded, still overwhelmed by the influx of information surrounding me. "Yeah, maybe we should." As Emma reached for her phone, I stood up, drawn to the window. Outside, the world was transforming before my eyes. The falling snow wasn't just beautiful. Each flake was a unique pattern, carrying information about atmospheric conditions, molecular structure, and the fundamental forces shaping our world. I pressed my hand against the cool glass, watching as my breath created new patterns of condensation. "It's all connected," I whispered, more to myself than to Emma. "Everything. All of it. We're just barely scratching the surface of what reality really is." Emma's voice broke through my reverie. "Dr. Chen? It's Emma, Olivia's sister. Something's happened. We need your help." As Emma spoke to Dr. Chen, arranging for an immediate appointment, I remained at the window, lost in the swirling patterns of the world outside. Part of me was exhilarated by this new understanding, but another part was terrified. What did this mean for me? For humanity? And how much further did this rabbit hole go? I thought back to the warning from my dream. With great knowledge comes great responsibility. I had a feeling I was only beginning to grasp what that truly meant. Liv? Emma's voice pulled me back to the present. Dr. Chen wants us to come in right away. Are you okay to go? I turned to face her, seeing the worry etched on her features. But beyond that, I could see the patterns of her very being, the complex interplay of thoughts, emotions, and energy that made her who she was. It was beautiful and overwhelming. Yeah, I said, taking a deep breath to center myself. Yeah, I'm okay. Let's go. As we prepared to leave, I cast one last look around my apartment. Every object, every shadow, every speck of dust seemed to pulse with hidden meaning. I had asked for understanding, and now I was getting it. More than I had ever imagined possible. Walking out into the crisp morning air, I felt like a different person than I had been just hours ago. The world had changed, or perhaps I had changed. Either way, there was no going back now. The patterns had opened a door and I had stepped through. Whatever lay ahead, I knew one thing for certain. Nothing would ever be the same again. The fluorescent lights of Dr. Chen's office buzzed overhead, their subtle flicker a cacophony of information to my newly awakened senses. I sat rigidly in the chair across from her desk, my hands clenched tightly in my lap to stop them from shaking. Emma stood behind me, a steady presence in the storm of sensory input that threatened to overwhelm me. Dr. Chen leaned forward, her brow furrowed with concern. Olivia, can you describe what you're experiencing right now? I took a deep breath, trying to focus. It's like the world is made of patterns. Not just visual patterns, but information, data. I can see how everything is connected, how it all fits together. It's beautiful and terrifying all at once. Dr. Chen nodded slowly, jotting notes on her pad. And this started after your dream last night? Yes, I said, my eyes drawn to the swirling patterns in the wood grain of her desk. In the dream, there was this entity. It called itself the Patterns. It said I was ready to understand, that I was at a nexus point. Emma spoke up from behind me. Dr. Chen, is this normal? I mean, obviously none of this is normal, but is it dangerous? Dr. Chen set down her pen, her expression grave. Honestly, we're in uncharted territory here. Olivia's brain scans have shown unprecedented levels of activity and connectivity. It's as if her entire brain is lighting up at once, processing information in ways we've never seen before. I closed my eyes, trying to shut out the overwhelming input. What does that mean for me? Am I losing my mind? No, Olivia, Dr. Chen said firmly. Your cognitive functions are intact. In fact, they seem to be operating at an extraordinarily high level. But we need to proceed carefully. This level of neural activity could potentially be harmful if sustained for too long. As Dr. Chen spoke, I found myself drawn to a painting on her wall. It was a simple landscape, but as I looked at it, layers of meaning began to unfold. I could see the mathematical principles behind the composition, the psychological impact of the color choices, even traces of the artist's emotional state as they painted it. Olivia? Dr. Chen's voice snapped me back to attention. Where did you go just now? I blinked, realizing I had been staring at the painting for several minutes. I was reading the painting, not just looking at it, but really reading it, like it was a book written in this universal language of patterns. Dr. Chen's eyes widened with interest. Can you elaborate on that? As I described what I had seen in the painting, Dr. Chen's pen flew across her notepad. When I finished, she sat back, a mix of awe and scientific curiosity on her face. Olivia, what you're describing, it's like you're perceiving layers of reality that most of us can't access. The implications of this are staggering. Emma stepped forward, placing a protective hand on my shoulder. That's all very fascinating, Dr. Chen. But what about Olivia? How do we help her deal with this? Dr. Chen nodded, her expression becoming serious again. You're right, of course. Olivia, I think we need to work on developing some coping mechanisms, ways for you to filter and manage this influx of information. Have you ever practiced meditation or mindfulness techniques? I shook my head. Not really. I've always been too busy, I guess. A small smile played at Dr. Chen's lips. Well, now might be the perfect time to start. I'd like you to work with Dr. Moonstone on some exercises. Her background in both neuroscience and Eastern philosophy might be particularly helpful in your case. As we left Dr. Chen's office, my head was spinning with new information and plans for more tests, more studies. Emma guided me to her car, her hand steady on my elbow. "How are you holding up, Liv?" she asked as we pulled out of the parking lot. I leaned my head against the cool glass of the window, watching the patterns of traffic flow around us. I don't know, Em. It's like I've been given the key to understanding everything, but I don't know how to use it. It's beautiful and overwhelming and terrifying all at once. Emma reached over, squeezing my hand. "We'll figure it out, Liv. One step at a time." Over the next few weeks, my life became a whirlwind of tests, experiments, and training sessions. Dr. Moonstone taught me meditation techniques to help manage the constant influx of information. Dr. Volkov ran complex simulations based on the patterns I described, his excitement growing with each new discovery. Dr. Stern monitored my psychological state, always watchful for signs of stress or breakdown. Through it all, the patterns continued to reveal themselves, each one a piece of the cosmic puzzle I was slowly learning to decipher. I began to see connections everywhere, between people, events, even abstract concepts. It was as if the universe itself was a vast, intricate tapestry, and I was finally learning to read its threads. One evening, about a month after my initial breakthrough, I sat cross-legged on the floor of my living room, surrounded by notebooks filled with sketches and equations. Emma sat on the couch, watching me with a mix of concern and fascination. "Liv," she said softly, "don't you think you should take a break? You've been at this for hours." I looked up, blinking as if coming out of a trance. "I'm close to something, Em. I can feel it. There's a pattern here, something big. If I can just..." My voice trailed off as a new connection sparked in my mind. I grabbed a fresh sheet of paper, my hand flying across it as I sketched out a complex diagram. "Oh my God," I whispered, staring at what I'd drawn. "Oh my God, Em, I think I've got it." Emma leaned forward, peering at the sketch. "Got what?" "Liv, what is this?" I stood up, my whole body trembling with excitement. "It's everything, Em. The fundamental pattern underlying all of reality, the way energy and matter and consciousness all interconnect. It's the theory of everything that physicists have been searching for." Emma's eyes widened. "Are you sure? Liv, this would be huge." I nodded, my mind racing. "We need to call Dr. Volkov and Dr. Chen, everyone. They need to see this." Within an hour, my small apartment was crowded with scientists, all huddled around my kitchen table where I'd laid out my diagrams and equations. Dr. Volkov was practically vibrating with excitement, his wild hair even more disheveled than usual. "This is extraordinary," he muttered, poring over the papers. "The elegance of it, the simplicity. Ms. Reeves, do you understand what you've done here?" I shook my head, feeling suddenly overwhelmed. "Not really, I saw the pattern and I knew it was important." Dr. Chen looked up from the papers, her eyes shining. "Olivia, if this checks out, and from what Dr. Volkov is saying, it seems to, you've just made one of the most significant scientific breakthroughs in human history." The room fell silent as the weight of her words sank in. I felt a wave of dizziness wash over me, and Emma quickly guided me to a chair. "What does this mean?" I asked, my voice small. "For me? For everyone?" Dr. Stern cleared his throat. "It means, Ms. Reeves, that we're entering uncharted territory. The implications of this discovery, they're beyond anything we could have imagined." As the scientists continued to discuss the ramifications of what I'd uncovered, I found myself drawn to the window. Outside, the aurora borealis was painting the night sky in shimmering curtains of light. But now, I could see more than just the beauty of it. I could see the complex interplay of solar winds and Earth's magnetic field, the dance of charged particles that created the spectacular display. And beyond that, I could see the patterns that connected this earthly phenomenon to the vast cosmic tapestry. For a moment, just a moment, I felt as if I could see the entire universe laid out before me. Every galaxy, every star, every atom pulsing with the same fundamental rhythm. Liv? Emma's voice broke through my reverie. Are you okay? I turned to her, tears streaming down my face. Em, it's so beautiful, all of it, and we're part of it. Every one of us, everything. We're all connected in ways we can't even begin to imagine. Emma pulled me into a tight hug. Oh, Liv, what are we going to do now? As I held onto my sister, my mind racing with the implications of what I'd discovered, I realized that this wasn't an end. It was a beginning. A door had been opened, and on the other side lay a new understanding of reality itself. Now, I said softly, we learn, we explore, and we try to use this knowledge to make the world a better place. As the scientists behind us continued their excited discussions, I stood there in my sister's embrace, watching the aurora dance across the sky. The patterns swirled around us, in us, through us, a constant reminder of the incredible, interconnected nature of existence. I had taken the first step on an incredible journey, one that would challenge everything we thought we knew about the universe and our place in it. And despite the fear, despite the uncertainty, I felt a surge of excitement for what lay ahead. The breakthrough had come. Now, it was time to see where it would lead us. The soft glow of my laptop screen illuminated the dimly lit hotel room in Geneva, Switzerland. Outside, the pre-dawn sky was just beginning to lighten, but I had been awake for hours, poring over the latest data from CERN's Large Hadron Collider. The patterns danced before my eyes, confirming theories and revealing new mysteries with each passing moment. A soft knock at the door broke my concentration. Liv, are you awake? Emma's voice came through, tinged with concern. I glanced at the clock, 4:37 a.m. Come in, Em, I called out, rubbing my tired eyes. Emma entered, already dressed for the day. Her face fell as she saw me, still in yesterday's clothes, surrounded by scattered papers and empty coffee cups. Oh, Liv, have you slept at all? I shook my head, gesturing to the laptop. Couldn't. The data from last night's collision... it's incredible. It's confirming everything we theorized, and then some. The implications for our understanding of dark matter alone are... Liv. Emma cut me off gently, placing a hand on my shoulder. I know this is important, but you can't keep pushing yourself like this. It's been months of nonstop work. You need to rest. I sighed, knowing she was right, but feeling the familiar pull of the patterns urging me to continue. I know. It's just, there's so much to learn, so much to understand. I feel like I'm racing against time. Emma sat on the edge of the bed, her expression serious. Racing against what, Liv? You've already revolutionized physics. What are you really running from? Her words hit me like a physical blow. I opened my mouth to protest, but the patterns swirling in my mind suddenly shifted, revealing a truth I had been avoiding for months. I don't know, Em. I guess I'm afraid that if I stop, if I slow down, I'll lose this connection, this understanding. Emma's eyes softened. Oh, Liv, is that what this is about? You're not going to lose your gift, but you might lose yourself if you keep going like this. As I looked at my sister, the patterns revealed layers of concern, love, and a deep-seated worry that I hadn't allowed myself to see before. And beneath it all, a flicker of something else. A memory, long suppressed, trying to surface. Em, I said slowly, do you remember when we were kids? And I used to have those nightmares? The ones about the swirling lights and strange symbols? Emma nodded, her brow furrowing. Yeah, of course, you'd wake up screaming almost every night for a while. Mom and Dad were so worried. But then they just stopped. You said you couldn't remember them anymore. I stood up, pacing the small room as the memory crystallized. I think I didn't forget them, Em. I think I buried them. Because they scared me. Because I didn't understand. What are you saying, Liv? I turned to face her, my heart racing. I think this has been part of me all along. The patterns, the understanding, it was always there, just beneath the surface. But I was too afraid to face it, so I pushed it down, locked it away. Emma stood, her face a mix of concern and curiosity. And now? What's changed? Everything, I whispered. And nothing. I'm still afraid, Em. Terrified, actually. But now I understand the cost of ignoring this part of myself. The patterns, they're not just about physics or mathematics, they're about connection. To the universe, to each other, to ourselves. As I spoke, a particular pattern caught my eye. A photo on the nightstand, one I had barely glanced at since arriving in Geneva. It was an old family picture from before our parents died. But there, in the background, was a face I had all but forgotten. Oh my God, I breathed, picking up the photo. Em, do you remember Aunt Sarah? Emma peered at the picture, her eyes widening in recognition. Mom's sister? The one they always said was different? Yeah, vaguely. Why? The patterns were practically screaming at me now, connections forming faster than I could process. Em, I think she was like me. The way they talked about her, the strange drawings she used to make. It all fits. Emma sat back down heavily on the bed. Liv, what are you saying? That this ability runs in our family? I nodded, my mind racing. Maybe. Or maybe it's more than that. Maybe it's not just about genetics. Maybe it's about being open to seeing the world in a different way. And Aunt Sarah? She might have answers we need. Emma looked skeptical. Liv, we haven't seen or heard from Aunt Sarah in years. We don't even know if she's still alive. I was already reaching for my phone, the patterns guiding my fingers as I typed. She is. And I think I know where to find her. Within hours, we were on a plane bound for a small town in the Scottish Highlands. As we flew over the patchwork landscape of Europe, I filled Emma in on what I had discovered. Aunt Sarah's been living off the grid for years, I explained, showing her the patterns I'd uncovered in old social media posts and public records. But she's been leaving breadcrumbs, Em. Patterns hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone who could see them to follow. Emma shook her head in disbelief. This is crazy, Liv. We're flying halfway across the world on a hunch? I took her hand, willing her to understand. It's more than a hunch, Em. It's like the universe itself is pointing us in this direction. I can't explain it, but I know it's right. As our rental car wound through the narrow, misty roads of the Highlands, I felt a growing sense of anticipation. The patterns in the landscape, the swirling fog, the ancient stones dotting the hills, all seemed to be leading us to a specific point. Finally, we crested a hill and saw a small cottage nestled in a valley below. Smoke curled from the chimney, and even from this distance I could see intricate designs painted on the walls and roof. This is it, I breathed. She's here. We parked the car and approached the cottage on foot. Before we could even knock, the door swung open, revealing a woman with wild gray hair and piercing blue eyes, eyes that mirrored my own. Took you long enough, Aunt Sarah said, a wry smile on her face. Come in, girls. We have a lot to talk about. The interior of the cottage was a riot of colors and patterns. Every surface was covered in intricate designs, some painted, some carved, some woven into tapestries. I felt an immediate sense of recognition. These were the same patterns I saw in my mind, in the fabric of reality itself. You see them too, Aunt Sarah said softly, watching my face. It wasn't a question. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. Emma looked between us, confusion and concern warring on her face. What's going on? She demanded. Aunt Sarah, how did you know we were coming? What is all this? Aunt Sarah gestured for us to sit at a small table by the fire. As she poured tea from an intricately patterned pot, she began to speak. It runs in our family, you know. This gift, this curse, whatever you want to call it, skips generations sometimes, manifests differently in others, but it's always there, waiting. I leaned forward, eager for answers. What is it exactly? Where does it come from? Aunt Sarah's eyes twinkled. Oh, child, it comes from everywhere and nowhere. It's the universe's way of seeing itself, understanding itself. And we're just the lucky few who get to be its eyes and ears. As Aunt Sarah spoke, the patterns around us seemed to come alive, swirling and shifting in response to her words. I could see Emma watching in awe, finally able to glimpse a fraction of what I had been experiencing. But why now? I asked. Why did it surface for me so suddenly? Aunt Sarah's face grew serious. The world is changing, Olivia. The patterns are shifting in ways they haven't for millennia. Something big is coming, and the universe needs those who can see, who can understand. A chill ran down my spine at her words. What's coming? Is it dangerous? Aunt Sarah shook her head. Not dangerous necessarily, but transformative. The next step in human evolution, perhaps. Or the key to unlocking the true nature of reality. It all depends on how we choose to use this gift. As the night wore on, Aunt Sarah shared stories of others in our family line who had possessed the gift. She taught us exercises to hone our perception, to filter the overwhelming flow of information. And slowly, I began to feel a sense of peace I hadn't experienced since this all began. As dawn broke, painting the misty valley in soft hues of pink and gold, I stood outside the cottage with Aunt Sarah. Emma was still inside, poring over old family journals filled with hidden knowledge. What do I do now? I asked softly. I've unlocked secrets of the universe, but I feel like I've barely scratched the surface. Aunt Sarah placed a gnarled hand on my shoulder. You keep learning, my dear. You keep growing. But most importantly, you remember that this gift isn't just about understanding the universe. It's about connecting with it, and with each other. I nodded, feeling the truth of her words resonate through the patterns around us. As I looked out over the misty landscape, I felt a profound sense of belonging, not just to this family legacy, but to the vast, intricate tapestry of existence itself. The journey ahead was still uncertain, filled with challenges and discoveries I couldn't yet imagine. But for the first time since this all began, I felt truly prepared to face it. With the wisdom of the past and the promise of the future guiding me, I was ready to embrace my role in the unfolding pattern of the universe. As Aunt Sarah and I turned to go back inside, a new pattern caught my eye. A single perfect spiral in the morning dew on a nearby leaf. It was a reminder that even in the smallest details, the greatest truths could be found. And I was finally ready to seek them out. The soft hum of the quantum computer filled the underground laboratory at CERN. Banks of monitors displayed a dizzying array of data, each screen a window into the fundamental workings of the universe. I stood at the center of it all, my eyes closed, my mind reaching out to interpret the flood of information. Olivia? Dr. Volkov's voice broke through my concentration. Are you ready to begin? I opened my eyes, taking in the anxious faces of the assembled scientists. Dr. Chen stood to my left, her hand hovering near a large red button, the emergency shutdown. Emma was off to the side, her face a mask of worry. I'm ready, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Today was the culmination of months of preparation. We were about to attempt something unprecedented, using my ability to perceive patterns to directly influence quantum phenomena. If it worked, it could revolutionize our understanding of the observer effect and potentially unlock new realms of scientific discovery. If it failed, well, no one was quite sure what would happen. Dr. Volkov nodded to his team. Initiating quantum field generation in 3, 2, 1. A low thrumming filled the air as the massive machine came to life. I felt it more than heard it. A vibration that seemed to resonate with the very fabric of reality. The patterns around me began to shift and swirl, more vivid and complex than ever before. Quantum field stable, a technician called out. Particle injection in 5 seconds. I took a deep breath, centering myself as Aunt Sarah had taught me. The world fell away, leaving only the patterns, the cosmic dance of energy and matter that underpinned all of existence. Particle injection complete. Olivia, can you sense the target particle? I reached out with my mind, sifting through the quantum foam until I found it, a single electron, suspended in a state of quantum superposition. It existed in multiple states simultaneously, a physical manifestation of probability itself. I see it, I murmured, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. Excellent, Dr. Volkov said, excitement evident in his voice. Now, Olivia, try to influence its spin. Remember, don't force it. Just suggest. I focused on the particle, visualizing the patterns of its quantum states. Gently, ever so gently, I nudged one pattern, encouraging it to align with my intention. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, suddenly, the pattern shifted. The electron's spin collapsed into a definite state, the exact one I had envisioned. A gasp went up from the assembled scientists. It worked, Dr. Volkov exclaimed. She did it. But I barely heard him. The act of influencing the particle had opened something inside me, a door I hadn't known existed. The patterns were no longer just visible. They were tangible, malleable. I could feel the quantum field around me, could sense the dance of virtual particles popping in and out of existence. Olivia? Dr. Chen's voice seemed to come from very far away. Olivia, your brainwave patterns are spiking. Are you all right? I tried to respond, but the words wouldn't come. The patterns were overwhelming, pulling me deeper into the quantum realm. I could see, feel, taste the fundamental forces of the universe. Gravity, electromagnetism, the strong and weak nuclear forces. They weren't separate entities, but aspects of a single unified field, and I was part of it. Her neural activity is off the charts, someone shouted. We need to shut it down. No, I managed to gasp out. I can do this. I can... The world exploded into light and pattern. For a timeless moment, I was everywhere and everywhen. My consciousness expanded to encompass the entire universe. I saw the birth of stars, the death of galaxies, the intricate dance of subatomic particles that made up all of reality. And then, just as suddenly, I was back in my body, gasping for air and collapsing to my knees. Liv! Emma was at my side in an instant, her arms around me. Liv, are you okay? Talk to me. I blinked, trying to focus on her face. The patterns were still there, but muted now. Background noise rather than an overwhelming symphony. I'm okay, Em, I think. That was intense. Dr. Chen knelt beside me, her face pale with concern. Olivia, what happened? Your brain activity. We've never seen anything like it. I shook my head, still trying to process the experience. I saw everything. The entire universe all at once. It was beautiful and terrifying, and I understood it, all of it, for just a moment. Dr. Volkov pushed his way through the crowd of concerned scientists. Did you say you understood everything? Olivia, this could be the breakthrough we've been waiting for. If you could describe what you saw, we could... Alexander! Dr. Chen cut him off sharply. Now is not the time. Olivia needs rest and medical attention. As they argued over me, I closed my eyes, trying to hold on to the fading echoes of that cosmic understanding. But it was slipping away like waking from a vivid dream. Em, I whispered, gripping my sister's hand. I need to get out of here. I need to think. Emma nodded, helping me to my feet. Okay, Liv, let's go. Despite the protests of the scientists, Emma managed to get me out of the lab and up to the surface. The cool night air hit me like a shock, grounding me back in the physical world. We found a quiet spot on a grassy hill overlooking the CERN complex. As we sat there under the stars, I tried to put into words what I had experienced. It was like seeing the source code of the universe, I said slowly. Everything was connected, Em. Not just metaphorically, but literally. Every particle, every force, every thought. It's all part of this incredible, intricate pattern. Emma listened silently, her hand in mine. Finally, she spoke. Liv, it's beyond anything we could have imagined when this all started. Are you sure you're okay? This isn't too much for you? I looked up at the night sky, seeing not just stars but the vast cosmic web that connected them. I don't know, Em. It's overwhelming, yes. But it's also right. Like this is what I was meant to do, what I was meant to see. But what does it mean? Emma pressed. What are you supposed to do with this knowledge? That was the question, wasn't it? The experience in the lab had shown me glimpses of possibilities beyond anything current science could explain. But it had also revealed the immense responsibility that came with such understanding. I think, I said slowly, that this isn't just about scientific discovery, it's about evolution. Human evolution. We're on the brink of something, Em. A new way of perceiving and interacting with the universe. Emma's brow furrowed. That sounds big and kind of scary. I nodded. It is, but it's also exciting. Think about it, Em. If we could learn to see and understand these patterns, to work with them instead of blindly stumbling through, we could solve so many problems. Climate change, disease, conflict, they're all just patterns waiting to be understood and adjusted. But who gets to make those adjustments? Emma asked, her voice tinged with worry. Who decides how to use this power? It was a valid concern, one that had been nagging at the back of my mind since this all began. I don't know, I admitted. But I do know that it can't just be me, or a handful of scientists. This knowledge, this ability, it belongs to all of humanity. As we sat there discussing the implications of what had happened, I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. The patterns were still there, swirling around and through us, but they no longer felt overwhelming. Instead, they felt like a guide, a roadmap to a future I was only beginning to glimpse. What happens now? Emma asked, as the first light of dawn began to paint the sky. I stood up, stretching muscles stiff from hours of sitting. Now we go back down there and face the music. There will be more tests, more questions, but we also start planning for what comes next. And what's that? I smiled, feeling a surge of excitement and purpose. We start teaching, Em. Not just the scientists, but everyone who's willing to learn. This gift, this ability to see and understand the patterns, it's not meant to be hoarded or used for personal gain. It's meant to be shared. As we made our way back to the CERN complex, I could already see the patterns shifting, adjusting to the new possibilities that had been unleashed. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges and potential pitfalls. But for the first time since this journey began, I felt truly ready to face it. The final test hadn't just been about influencing quantum particles. It had been about understanding my place in the grand pattern of the universe. And now, with that understanding, it was time to take the next step, not just for myself, but for all of humanity. As we re-entered the lab, faced with the barrage of questions and concerns from the assembled scientists, I stood tall, ready to embrace my role in shaping the future. The patterns swirled around us, a constant reminder of the incredible journey that lay ahead. The auditorium was packed to capacity. A sea of eager faces turned towards the stage where I stood, my heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. It had been 2 years since that fateful day at CERN, 2 years of intense research, heated debates, and groundbreaking discoveries. And now, here we were, on the cusp of sharing our findings with the world. I took a deep breath, centering myself as Aunt Sarah had taught me. The patterns swirled around me, through me, a constant reminder of the interconnectedness of all things. With a nod to Emma, who stood in the wings offering silent support, I began. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed colleagues and friends, thank you for joining us today for what we believe will be a turning point in human history. The room fell silent, the anticipation palpable. 2 years ago, a series of events led to a discovery that has fundamentally changed our understanding of the universe and our place in it. We call it the universal pattern theory, but in reality, it's much more than a theory. It's a new way of perceiving and interacting with the very fabric of reality itself. As I spoke, holographic displays came to life behind me, showcasing the intricate patterns we had discovered. The audience gasped as the visuals shifted and flowed, mirroring the cosmic dance of energy and matter. What you're seeing is not just a visual representation, but a real-time display of the quantum fields that surround us. These patterns exist everywhere, in everything. They are the underlying structure of our reality, and we have learned not only to see them, but to interpret and, in some cases, influence them. A murmur ran through the crowd. I could see the skepticism on some faces, the wonder on others. Dr. Vol5, seated in the front row, was practically vibrating with excitement. I know this sounds incredible, perhaps even impossible, but over the past 2 years we have rigorously tested and verified these findings. We've successfully predicted quantum events, influenced particle behavior at a distance, and even begun to unlock the mysteries of consciousness itself. I paused, letting the weight of these statements sink in. Then, with a smile, I continued. But this discovery is not just about scientific advancement. It's about the next step in human evolution. We believe that with proper training, anyone can learn to perceive these patterns. And with that perception comes a profound understanding of our place in the cosmos and our responsibility to it. As if on cue, the doors at the back of the auditorium opened. In walked a diverse group of individuals, children and adults, from all walks of life. These were the students of our first pattern perception class, ordinary people who had learned to see and interact with the universal patterns. These brave individuals have spent the last 6 months learning to see what I see. They are the pioneers of a new age of human consciousness, and today they're going to show you what's possible. For the next hour, we demonstrated the practical applications of our discovery. Students manipulated quantum fields to purify water, accelerated plant growth through pattern alignment, and even demonstrated rudimentary telepathic communication. The audience watched in stunned silence, occasionally breaking into applause or exclamations of disbelief. As the demonstrations concluded, I returned to center stage. What you've seen today is just the beginning. The potential applications of this knowledge are limitless, from solving our energy crisis to curing diseases, from enhancing human cognition to restoring our planet's ecosystems. But with this power comes great responsibility. I took a moment to make eye contact with various members of the audience, my gaze finally settling on Emma. Her proud smile gave me strength to continue. We stand at a crossroads. This knowledge could be used to create a more harmonious, sustainable world, or it could be weaponized, used to consolidate power and further divide us. That's why we've chosen to share this discovery openly, with all of humanity, because the choice of how to use it should belong to all of us. The room erupted in a cacophony of voices, questions, exclamations, debates breaking out in every corner. I raised my hands, calling for quiet. I know you have questions, I know this is overwhelming, but I ask you to approach this with an open mind and an open heart. In the coming months, we will be releasing our findings, our methodologies, and our training programs to the public. We invite scientists, philosophers, and leaders from all fields to join us in exploring the implications of this discovery. As I concluded my speech, the audience rose in a standing ovation. The energy in the room was electric, a mixture of excitement, fear, and hope for the future. In the chaos that followed, I found myself surrounded by reporters, scientists, and curious onlookers. Questions flew at me from all directions. Dr. Reeves, how do you respond to critics who say this is pseudoscience? Is there a danger of this knowledge being misused? Will this replace traditional scientific methods? I held up my hands, overwhelmed by the barrage. Please, one at a time. We'll be holding a detailed press conference tomorrow to address all your questions. Finally, security managed to clear a path, and I made my way backstage. Emma was waiting for me, her face beaming with pride. "You did it, Liv," she said, pulling me into a tight hug. "You actually did it." I hugged her back, feeling a mixture of relief and exhaustion. "We did it, Em. I couldn't have done any of this without you." As we made our way out of the building, slipping past the crowds through a back exit, I felt a familiar presence. Aunt Sarah was waiting by a sleek electric car, her wild gray hair now streaked with more white but her eyes as piercing as ever. "Well done, my dear," she said, embracing me. "You've taken the first step. Are you ready for what comes next?" I nodded, feeling a mix of excitement and trepidation. "I think so, but it's not going to be easy, is it?" Aunt Sarah's laugh was like wind chimes in a breeze. "Oh, child, nothing worth doing ever is. But you're not alone in this. Remember that." As we drove through the city, I gazed out the window, seeing the world through new eyes. The patterns were everywhere, in the flow of traffic, the growth of trees lining the streets, the interactions between people on the sidewalks. It was beautiful and overwhelming, a constant reminder of the responsibility we now carried. We arrived at a small, secluded house on the outskirts of the city. As we entered, I was greeted by familiar faces: Dr. Chen, Dr. Volkov, Dr. Stern, and others who had been part of this journey from the beginning. Dr. Chen approached me, her face serious. "Olivia, the UN Security Council has requested an emergency meeting. They want to discuss the implications of our announcement." I nodded, having expected this. "When?" "Tomorrow morning. They're sending a plane tonight." I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the challenges ahead. This was just the beginning. We had opened Pandora's box, and now we had to ensure that the power we had unleashed would be used for the benefit of all. As the night wore on, we discussed strategies, prepared statements, and tried to anticipate the questions and concerns that would be raised. The weight of what we had done, what we were about to do, settled over us like a heavy blanket. In a quiet moment, I slipped away to the backyard. The night sky stretched above me, a canvas of stars and swirling galaxies. The patterns of the cosmos danced before my eyes, a reminder of the vastness and beauty of the universe we were just beginning to truly understand. Emma joined me, wrapping a blanket around my shoulders. "Penny for your thoughts?" I smiled, leaning into her. "Just thinking about how far we've come, and how far we still have to go." "Having second thoughts?" she asked softly. I shook my head. "No, it's overwhelming, and a little terrifying. But it's right. This knowledge, this ability, it doesn't belong to just me or a select few. It belongs to all of humanity. And if it can help us solve the problems we're facing, create a better world, then it's worth all the challenges ahead." Emma squeezed my hand. "Well, whatever comes next, we're in it together. You know that, right?" I nodded, feeling a surge of gratitude for my sister, for all the people who had supported me on this journey. "I know, and that makes all the difference." As we stood there under the starry sky, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with potential pitfalls and challenges we couldn't yet imagine, but it was also filled with hope. Hope for a future where humanity could live in harmony with the universal patterns, where we could solve problems that had plagued us for millennia. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new questions to answer. But for now, in this moment, I allowed myself to simply be, to feel the patterns flowing through me, connecting me to the earth beneath my feet, the stars above, and every living thing in between. As I closed my eyes, I saw not darkness but a symphony of light and pattern, the universe in all its complexity and beauty. And I knew with a certainty that ran bone deep that this was just the beginning of our greatest adventure. The dawn of a new era was upon us, and we were ready to face it, together, The incessant beeping of my alarm clock pierced through the veil of sleep, dragging me back to consciousness. I groaned, fumbling blindly for the source of the noise, my hand slapping against the nightstand until I finally silenced the infernal device. The sudden quiet was almost as jarring as the alarm itself. As I lay there staring at the ceiling, the weight of the day ahead settled over me like a heavy blanket. Today was the day that would change everything. With a deep breath, I swung my legs over the side of the bed, my bare feet touching the cold hardwood floor. The chill sent a shiver up my spine, a stark reminder that I was very much alive, and that this was not just another dream. I shuffled to the bathroom, flicking on the light and wincing at my reflection in the mirror. Dark circles under my eyes betrayed the restless night I'd endured. I splashed cold water on my face, hoping to wash away the remnants of sleep and the gnawing anxiety that had taken up residence in the pit of my stomach. "Get it together, Alex," I muttered to myself, gripping the edges of the sink. "You've prepared for this. You're ready." But was I? The question echoed in my mind as I went through the motions of my morning routine. Shower, shave, dress. Each action felt mechanical, disconnected from reality. It wasn't until I was pouring my coffee that the gravity of the situation truly hit me. The mug slipped from my trembling hands, shattering on the kitchen floor and sending hot liquid splashing across the tiles. "Shit," I cursed, jumping back to avoid the scalding coffee. As I stood there, surrounded by ceramic shards and the pungent aroma of spilled coffee, a hysterical laugh bubbled up from my chest. Here I was, about to embark on the most dangerous mission of my life, and I couldn't even manage to pour a cup of coffee without incident. The absurdity of it all was almost too much to bear. A sharp knock at the door snapped me out of my momentary breakdown. I froze, my heart rate accelerating. They weren't supposed to be here for another hour. Had something changed? Had we been compromised? I moved silently to the door, years of training kicking in as I reached for the gun hidden in the umbrella stand. The cool metal against my palm was oddly comforting as I peered through the peephole. Relief washed over me as I recognized the face on the other side. I quickly stashed the gun and opened the door. "Jesus, Sarah, you nearly gave me a heart attack," I said, ushering my partner inside. Sarah's sharp eyes took in the scene. Me, disheveled and on edge, the broken mug and spilled coffee in the kitchen. Her lips quirked into a wry smile. "Rough morning?" I ran a hand through my hair, exhaling slowly. "You could say that. What are you doing here so early?" Her expression turned serious, all traces of amusement vanishing. "There's been a change of plans. We need to move now." The bottom dropped out of my stomach. "What happened?" Sarah glanced around nervously, lowering her voice. "Not here. The car's waiting. We need to go." I nodded, grabbing my pre-packed bag from beside the door. As I followed Sarah out, I cast one last look at my apartment. The broken mug, the spilled coffee. It all seemed so trivial now. I had a feeling I wouldn't be coming back here for a long time, if ever. The ride to the rendezvous point was tense, filled with a heavy silence that neither of us seemed willing to break. Sarah's knuckles were white on the steering wheel, her jaw clenched tight. Whatever had caused the change in plans, it wasn't good. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. "Sarah, talk to me. What's going on?" She glanced at me, then back at the road. "The mole. We found out who it is." My blood ran cold. We'd known for months that there was a traitor in our midst, feeding information to the enemy. The knowledge had poisoned the agency, turning colleague against colleague, friend against friend. Trust had become a luxury we couldn't afford. "Who?" I asked, dreading the answer. Sarah's voice was barely above a whisper. "It's Jenkins." The name hit me like a physical blow. Jenkins, our handler, the man who had recruited me, trained me, become like a father to me over the years. It couldn't be true. "No," I said, shaking my head in denial. "There has to be some mistake. Jenkins would never—" "I saw the evidence myself, Alex." Sarah cut me off, her voice sharp with pain and betrayal. "It's him. He's been playing us all along. I slumped back in my seat, my mind reeling. If Jenkins was the mole, then everything, our entire mission, years of work, was compromised. The implications were staggering. "What do we do now?" I asked, feeling lost. Sarah's eyes met mine, filled with a determination that sent a chill down my spine. "We do what we were trained to do. We adapt, we survive, and we complete the mission." As we pulled up to the abandoned warehouse that served as our rendezvous point, I saw the faces of our team. Each one bore the same mix of shock, anger, and resolve that I felt churning inside me. They knew. Director Hawthorne stepped forward as we exited the car. His face was grim, the lines around his eyes deeper than I'd ever seen them. "Alex, Sarah, glad you made it. I assume you've been briefed on the situation?" I nodded, unable to find words. The reality of Jenkins's betrayal was still sinking in. Hawthorne continued, his voice low and intense. "The mission parameters have changed. Our window of opportunity is closing fast. Jenkins knows too much. If we don't act now, everything we've worked for will be lost." He paused, his gaze sweeping over each of us. "I won't lie to you. This is a suicide mission. The odds of all of us making it back are slim. If anyone wants to back out, now's the time. No judgment, no consequences." The silence that followed was deafening. I looked around at my teammates, the people I'd trained with, laughed with, bled with. Not a single one of them moved. Finally, I stepped forward. "We're in, sir. All of us. Whatever it takes." Hawthorne nodded, a flicker of pride in his eyes. "All right then, gear up. We move in 30 minutes. As the team dispersed to prepare, Sarah caught my arm. "Alex, are you sure about this? There's no shame in walking away, not after what Jenkins did." I met her gaze, seeing my own fear and determination reflected in her eyes. "I'm sure. This is bigger than Jenkins, bigger than any of us. We have a job to do." She squeezed my arm, a gesture of solidarity and something more. Something we'd never had the courage to put into words. "Okay, then let's do it. Together." As I turned to gear up, my mind wandered back to the broken mug on my kitchen floor. Such a small, insignificant thing. Yet in that moment it felt like a metaphor for my life. Shattered, messy, but not beyond repair. Whatever happened in the coming hours, I knew one thing for certain. Nothing would ever be the same again. With a deep breath, I pushed aside my fears and doubts. There would be time for reflection later if we survived. For now, there was a mission to complete, a world to save, and a traitor to bring to justice. The real test was just beginning. The rhythmic thrum of the helicopter blades filled my ears as we soared over the darkened landscape. Dawn was still hours away, and the world below us was a patchwork of shadows and pinpricks of light. I checked my gear for the 100th time, my fingers tracing the familiar contours of my weapons and equipment. Beside me, Sarah's face was a mask of concentration as she studied the blueprints of our target one last time. The rest of our team, Johnson, Rodriguez, and Chen, sat in grim silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Director Hawthorne's voice crackled through our comms. "ETA 5 minutes. Remember, people, we're walking into the hornet's nest. Trust no one but each other." The words sent a chill down my spine. Trust no one. It had become our mantra since discovering Jenkins's betrayal. The man who had been like a father to me was now our most dangerous enemy. As if reading my thoughts, Sarah leaned in close, her voice low. "Alex, I know this is personal for you, but we can't let emotions cloud our judgment. If we encounter Jenkins..." "I know." I cut her off, my voice harsher than I intended. "I'll do what needs to be done." She held my gaze for a moment longer, concern evident in her eyes before nodding and turning back to her preparations. The helicopter banked sharply, and suddenly our target came into view. The compound was a sprawling complex of buildings nestled in a valley, surrounded by dense forest. It looked innocuous enough, a high-tech research facility according to its cover story. But we knew better. This was the heart of the enemy's operation, and somewhere inside was the information we needed to prevent a global catastrophe. 30 seconds, the pilot's voice rang out. We rose as one, moving to the open door of the chopper. The wind whipped at us, threatening to tear us from our precarious perch. I felt the familiar surge of adrenaline, the mix of fear and excitement that always preceded a drop. Remember, Hawthorne's voice came through one last time. Your primary objective is to secure the data. Everything else is secondary. Good luck, and Godspeed. With that, we leapt into the void. The free fall was exhilarating, the rush of air drowning out everything but the pounding of my own heart. For a few precious seconds, all the complications, all the betrayals, all the weight of our mission fell away. There was only this moment suspended between earth and sky. Then reality rushed back as I deployed my chute, the sudden jerk nearly knocking the wind out of me. I guided myself down, aiming for the small clearing we'd designated as our landing zone. One by one, I saw the others touch down around me. We worked quickly and silently, burying our chutes and checking our gear. A quick series of hand signals confirmed everyone was good to go. It was time. We moved through the forest like ghosts, our training allowing us to navigate the difficult terrain without a sound. As we approached the perimeter of the compound, I held up a fist, signaling the team to halt. Ahead of us, a patrol of guards made their rounds, their flashlights cutting through the pre-dawn gloom. I waited, counting the seconds between their passes. There, a gap in their pattern. Now, I whispered, and we sprinted across the open ground to the fence. Chen made short work of the electrified barrier, his tech skills proving invaluable once again. We slipped through the gap he created, entering the lion's den. The compound was eerily quiet. Too quiet. My instincts screamed that something was wrong, but we had no choice but to press on. We made our way to the main building, using the shadows as cover. Just as we reached the side entrance, a voice called out behind us, "Stop right there." We froze, my hand instinctively moving to my weapon. Slowly, I turned to face the speaker, and my heart nearly stopped. Jenkins stood there, his gun trained on us, a small squad of guards flanking him. His face, once so familiar and trustworthy, now seemed alien in its coldness. "I have to admit, I'm impressed you made it this far," he said, his voice carrying the same fatherly tone I remembered, now twisted with mockery. "But then I trained you well, didn't I, Alex?" The betrayal I'd been holding at bay suddenly surged forward, threatening to overwhelm me. "Why, Jenkins?" I managed to choke out. "Why did you do it?" He laughed, a hollow sound that echoed in the stillness of the night. "Why does anyone do anything? Power, money, ideology. Take your pick. The world is changing, Alex. I'm just making sure I'm on the winning side." "By selling out your country? Your friends?" Sarah spat, her voice filled with venom. Jenkins shrugged, seemingly unaffected by her anger. "Collateral damage. You'll understand someday. Or not. It doesn't really matter now." He gestured with his gun. "Drop your weapons. It's over." I saw Rodriguez tense, ready to make a move. But before any of us could act, the night exploded into chaos. A series of explosions rocked the compound, the shockwaves knocking us off our feet. Alarms blared to life, and suddenly, the air was filled with shouts and gunfire. I rolled to my feet, my training kicking in despite the confusion. Through the smoke and debris, I saw Jenkins and his men scrambling for cover. This was our chance. "Move!" I yelled, and our team sprang into action. We fought our way into the building, using the chaos as cover. The interior was a maze of corridors and rooms, but Sarah's memorization of the blueprints guided us true. We battled through pockets of resistance, each encounter a brutal, close-quarters affair. Finally, we reached our objective, a heavily fortified server room at the heart of the facility. Chen went to work on the security systems while the rest of us stood guard. "We've got company," Johnson called out, laying down suppressing fire as a group of enemies approached from the left flank. I joined him, my rifle barking as I picked off targets, but they kept coming. and I knew we were running out of time. "Chen, talk to me," I shouted over the gunfire. "Almost there," he replied, his fingers flying over his tablet. "Just need another minute." A minute we might not have. I saw Rodriguez take a hit, stumbling back with a cry of pain. Sarah moved to cover him, her face a mask of determination as she held off the advancing forces. Just when it seemed we might be overwhelmed, Chen's voice rang out. "I'm in. Downloading the data now." Relief flooded through me, but it was short-lived. A new voice cut through the chaos, one that sent ice through my veins. "Well done, Alex. I always knew you had it in you." Jenkins stood at the end of the corridor, looking disheveled but triumphant. In his hand was a detonator. "You've got what you came for," he said, his finger hovering over the button. "But I'm afraid this is where your mission ends, along with everything else." Time seemed to slow. I saw the resolve in Jenkins' eyes, knew that he was prepared to bring the whole place down around us. In that moment, all the questions, all the betrayal, all the history between us crystallized into a single, inescapable truth. There was only one way this could end. I raised my gun, aiming at the man who had been my mentor, my father figure, my friend. Our eyes met, and for a brief instant, I saw a flicker of the man I once knew. "I'm sorry," I whispered, and pulled the trigger. The gunshot echoed through the corridor, impossibly loud even amidst the chaos. Jenkins stumbled, surprise etched on his face. The detonator fell from his grasp, clattering to the floor. As he collapsed, I rushed forward, securing the device. It was over. We had won. But as I looked down at Jenkins' body, I felt no triumph, no satisfaction, only a profound sense of loss and a bone-deep weariness. "Alex," Sarah's voice broke through my reverie. "We need to move. Now." I nodded, pushing my emotions aside. There would be time for reflection later. For now, we had a mission to complete and a team to get home safely. As we made our escape, the weight of what we'd accomplished and what we'd lost settled over me. The data we'd retrieved could save millions of lives, but at what cost? And what new challenges awaited us in the aftermath of this night? One thing was certain: nothing would ever be the same again. As we raced towards extraction, leaving the burning compound behind, I knew that this was not the end, but merely the beginning of a new and dangerous chapter in our lives. The real war was just beginning. The safe house was a nondescript apartment in a bustling part of the city. To the casual observer, it would appear no different from the countless other residences lining the street. But for us, it was a fortress, our last bastion of safety in a world that had suddenly become infinitely more dangerous. I stood by the window, peering through a gap in the curtains at the street below. The events of the past 48 hours played on an endless loop in my mind. The mission, Jenkins's betrayal, the chaos of our escape. My finger absently traced the outline of the flash drive in my pocket, a small device that held information that could change the course of history. "Alex," Sarah's voice broke through my reverie. "Step away from the window. You're making me nervous." I turned to face her, taking in the worry lines etched on her face. The rest of our team was scattered around the small living room. Rodriguez, nursing his wound on the couch, Chen hunched over his laptop, and Johnson keeping watch at the door. "Sorry," I muttered, moving away from the window. "Any word from Hawthorne?" Sarah shook her head. "Nothing yet. Comms have been silent since the extraction." The silence was unnerving. Protocol dictated that we should have been contacted by now, given a new set of orders or at least an acknowledgement of the mission's success. The longer we waited, the more my unease grew. Chen looked up from his computer, his face pale. "Guys, you need to see this." We gathered around him as he turned the laptop to face us. On the screen was a news report, the anchor's voice filling the room. "In a shocking turn of events, the director of a top-secret government agency has been arrested on charges of treason. Sources close to the investigation claim that Director Thomas Hawthorne was involved in a plot to sell classified information to foreign powers." The words hit me like a physical blow. Hawthorne, arrested? It didn't make sense. "This has to be a mistake," I said, my voice sounding hollow even to my own ears. Sarah's hand found mine, squeezing it tightly. "Or it's a setup," she said, her tone grim. "If Jenkins had allies higher up." The implication hung heavy in the air. If Hawthorne had been compromised, then our entire agency could be compromised. We were truly on our own. Rodriguez winced as he sat up straighter. "So what's our play? We can't exactly walk into HQ and hand over the intel now." I ran a hand through my hair, my mind racing. "We need to verify this information first. Chen, can you dig deeper? See if you can find any chatter about Hawthorne's arrest that isn't making the news?" Chen nodded, his fingers already flying over the keyboard. "On it." "Johnson," I continued, "I need you to reach out to your contacts. Quietly. See if anyone knows anything about what's really going on." "You got it, boss," Johnson replied, already moving towards the door. "Wait," Sarah interjected. "We shouldn't split up, it's too dangerous." I understood her concern, but we were running out of options. "We don't have a choice, Sarah. We need information and we need it fast." She held my gaze for a long moment before nodding reluctantly. "Fine, but Johnson, you check in every hour. If we don't hear from you—" "I know the drill," Johnson said with a grim smile. "Don't worry, I'll be careful." As he left, I turned back to Sarah and Rodriguez. "We need to prepare for the worst. If Hawthorne's really been arrested, if the agency's been compromised, we might be looking at a full-scale purge." Rodriguez let out a low whistle. "Jesus, you really think it could go that far?" I thought back to Jenkins, to the cold determination in his eyes as he held that detonator. I think we've only scratched the surface of how deep this conspiracy goes. The next few hours were tense, filled with hushed conversations and furtive planning. Chen worked tirelessly, sifting through data streams and encrypted channels. Sarah and I pored over contingency plans, trying to anticipate every possible scenario. It was nearing midnight when Johnson finally returned, his face ashen. "It's bad," he said without preamble. "Hawthorne's arrest is just the beginning. There's a full-scale internal investigation happening. Agents are being brought in for questioning left and right." My stomach churned. "Any names we recognize?" Johnson nodded grimly. "Thompson from logistics, Ramirez from counter-intel, and—" He hesitated, his eyes flicking to Sarah. "Your handler, Davis." Sarah's sharp intake of breath was the only sound in the suddenly silent room. Davis had been her mentor, much as Jenkins had been mine. The parallels were not lost on any of us. "This is a witch hunt," Sarah said, her voice tight with anger. "They're using Hawthorne's arrest as an excuse to root out anyone who might oppose them." "Or anyone who knows too much," I added, the pieces starting to fall into place. "Think about it. Why go after Hawthorne now? Why not when they first turned Jenkins?" Chen looked up from his laptop. "Because they needed him in place for our mission to succeed. They wanted that data as much as we did." The realization hit me like a thunderbolt. We've been played. This whole mission. It was never about stopping a threat. It was about acquiring information they could use to consolidate their power. The weight of our situation settled over us like a shroud. We weren't just fugitives now. We were pawns in a game much larger and more dangerous than we had ever imagined. "So what do we do now?" Rodriguez asked, voicing the question on all our minds. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of leadership settle on my shoulders. "We do what we were trained to do. We fight back." Sarah's eyes met mine, a fierce determination burning in them. "How?" I pulled the flash drive from my pocket, holding it up. "With this. The data we risked our lives for. It's not just weapon schematics or military secrets, it's evidence. A paper trail linking high-ranking officials to a shadow organization that's been manipulating global events for years." Chen's eyes widened. "You mean—" I nodded. "The very people who are trying to take control of our agency are implicated in this data. If we can get this information to the right people, we can expose the entire conspiracy. And paint a massive target on our backs in the process, Rodriguez pointed out. We already have targets on our backs, Sarah countered. At least this way we're fighting for something. A moment of silence fell as we all contemplated the enormity of what we were considering. We were 5 people against a vast, shadowy network with tendrils reaching into the highest levels of government. The odds were overwhelmingly against us. But as I looked around at my team, at Sarah's unwavering resolve, Chen's quiet determination, Rodriguez's grim acceptance, and Johnson's steadfast loyalty, I felt a spark of hope ignite in my chest. "It won't be easy," I said, my voice steady despite the fear churning in my gut. "We'll be hunted. We'll have to go off the grid, trust no one but each other. And even if we succeed, our lives will never be the same." I paused, looking each of them in the eye. "I won't order any of you to do this. If you want to walk away now, I'll understand." The silence that followed was deafening. Then, one by one, they nodded. "We're with you, Alex," Sarah said, speaking for all of them. "Till the end." A lump formed in my throat and I had to swallow hard before I could speak. "All right then. Let's get to work." As we began to plan our next move, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were standing on the precipice of something monumental. The path ahead was fraught with danger, but for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a sense of purpose. We were no longer just survivors, reacting to events beyond our control. We were becoming something more, the last line of defense against a threat that could reshape the world as we knew it. As the first light of dawn began to creep through the windows, we prepared to step out of the shadows and into the fight of our lives. Whatever came next, we would face it together. The real war had begun, and we were ready. The rain pelted down in sheets, obscuring the city in a gray haze. I pulled my collar up, trying to shield myself from the downpour as I made my way through the crowded streets. My eyes darted from face to face, searching for any sign of recognition, any hint that we'd been made. It had been 3 weeks since we'd gone off the grid. 3 weeks of constant movement, of looking over our shoulders, of trusting no one but each other. The weight of the flash drive in my inner pocket felt like a ticking time bomb. I ducked into a dingy internet cafe, shaking off the rain as I scanned the dimly lit room. In the far corner, I spotted Chen hunched over a computer, his fingers flying across the keyboard. I made my way over, sliding into the seat next to him. "Anything?" I asked, keeping my voice low. Chen shook his head, frustration evident in his furrowed brow. "They're good, Alex. Really good. Every time I think I've found a secure channel to upload the data, they're there, blocking me. It's like they're always one step ahead." I cursed under my breath. We'd been trying to release the incriminating information for days, but at every turn we were thwarted. Our unseen enemies seemed to have eyes and ears everywhere. "We need to change tactics," I muttered, more to myself than to Chen. "We can't keep playing defense." Chen opened his mouth to respond, but froze, his eyes fixed on something over my shoulder. I tensed, ready for action, but his next words sent a chill down my spine. "Alex," he whispered, "don't react. But the man who just walked in? He's agency. I recognize him from the tech division." My heart rate spiked, but I forced myself to remain calm. "Are you sure?" Chen nodded almost imperceptibly. "Positive. What do we do?" I weighed our options quickly. If we bolted now, we'd draw attention. But if we stayed too long, we risked being cornered. "Finish what you're doing," I said quietly. "Act natural. We'll leave in 2 minutes." Those 2 minutes felt like an eternity. I could feel the agent's eyes on us, boring into the back of my head. When Chen finally closed his session, we stood up casually and made our way to the exit. We were almost at the door when a voice called out, "Excuse me, gentlemen." We froze. Slowly I turned to face the agent, my hand inching towards the concealed weapon at my waist. The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I couldn't help but notice you boys seem a bit lost. Perhaps I could help you find your way." The threat was clear beneath the veneer of politeness. I saw Chen tense beside me, ready to run. But before either of us could move, the front window of the cafe exploded inward in a shower of glass. Chaos erupted. Patrons screamed and dove for cover as masked figures poured through the shattered window. In the confusion, I grabbed Chen and bolted for the back exit. We burst out into a rain-soaked alley, our feet splashing through puddles as we ran. Behind us, I could hear shouts and the sound of pursuit. "Split up," I yelled to Chen. "Meet at the rendezvous point." He nodded and veered off down a side street. I continued straight, my lungs burning as I pushed myself to run faster. The sound of footsteps behind me grew closer. I rounded a corner and found myself face to face with a chain-link fence. Without breaking stride, I leaped, my fingers finding purchase on the wet metal. I hauled myself over, landing hard on the other side. A bullet pinged off the fence near my head, spurring me back into motion. I zigzagged through a maze of alleys and side streets, using every trick I knew to lose my pursuers. Finally, after what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, I found myself in a quiet residential area. The sound of pursuit had faded, but I didn't slow down. I couldn't afford to assume I was safe. I made my way to the rendezvous point, an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. As I approached, every nerve in my body was on high alert. Had the others made it? Or was I walking into a trap? I slipped inside through a side entrance, my gun drawn. The interior was dark and cavernous, filled with shadows that could hide any number of threats. "Alex?" Sarah's voice called out softly from the darkness. Relief flooded through me. "I'm here," I responded, moving towards the sound of her voice. As my eyes adjusted to the gloom, I saw the rest of the team emerge from their hiding spots. Chen looked shaken but unharmed. Rodriguez was favoring his injured side, but his eyes were alert. Johnson stood guard by the main entrance, his weapon at the ready. Sarah rushed to me, her eyes scanning me for injuries. "Are you okay? What happened?" I quickly recounted the events at the internet cafe. As I spoke, I saw the gravity of our situation settle over the group. "They found us," Rodriguez said, his voice tight with tension. "How the hell did they find us?" "It doesn't matter how," I replied. "What matters is that they did. We need to assume nowhere is safe now." Sarah ran a hand through her hair, frustration evident in every line of her body. "We can't keep running forever, Alex. We need to make a move." She was right, of course. We'd been on the defensive since this whole ordeal began, reacting rather than acting. It was time to change that. "Okay," I said, my mind racing. "Chen, what's the most secure location you can think of to upload the data?" Chen thought for a moment. "There's a server farm about 50 miles from here. State-of-the-art security, both physical and digital. If we could get inside, we might have a chance." "But?" I prompted, sensing the hesitation in his voice. "But it's also one of the most heavily guarded facilities in the country. Breaking in would be challenging, to say the least." I nodded, already formulating a plan. "Challenging, but not impossible. Johnson, what kind of firepower can you get us on short notice?" Johnson grinned, a predatory gleam in his eye. "Give me 2 hours in a good hardware store, I can get us just about anything." "Good. Rodriguez, how's that side of yours? Are you up for some action?" Rodriguez straightened, wincing slightly but nodding firmly. "Just point me in the right direction, boss." I turned to Sarah last, meeting her gaze. In her eyes, I saw the same mix of fear and determination that I felt. "Sarah, I need you to reach out to your old contacts, anyone you trust implicitly. We're going to need eyes and ears on the inside if we're going to pull this off." She nodded, already pulling out a burner phone. "I'm on it." As the team sprang into action, I felt a surge of pride. Despite everything we'd been through, despite the odds stacked against us, they were still ready to fight, still ready to risk everything for what was right. I pulled out the flash drive, turning it over in my hands. This little device held the key to unraveling a conspiracy that reached to the highest levels of power. But it was more than that. It represented a choice to stand up against corruption, to fight for the truth, no matter the cost. "All right, people," I said, raising my voice to address the team. I won't lie to you. What we're about to do is dangerous. There's a good chance not all of us will make it out. If anyone wants to walk away now, this is your last chance." The silence that followed was answer enough. We were in this together, till the end. "Okay then," I continued, feeling a fierce determination settle over me. "Let's go over the plan. We have one shot at this, so we need to get it right." As we huddled together, planning our assault on what might be the most secure facility in the country, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were on the cusp of something monumental. Win or lose, the next 24 hours would change everything. The hunter had become the hunted, but we weren't going down without a fight. It was time to take the war to them. The night was moonless, a blessing for our covert operation. We crouched in the shadows at the perimeter of the server farm, our breath misting in the cold air. The facility loomed before us, a fortress of concrete and steel, bristling with security measures both visible and hidden. I checked my watch. 02:37, right on schedule. "Comms check," I whispered into my earpiece. "Eagle in position," came Sarah's voice. She was our eyes in the sky, perched on a nearby hill with a high-powered scope. "Wizard ready?" Chen replied. He was in a nondescript van a mile down the road, ready to work his digital magic. "Hammer standing by," Johnson growled. He was our muscle, armed to the teeth and itching for action. "Shadow in place," Rodriguez confirmed. Despite his injury, he had insisted on being part of the ground team. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. "Remember, people, we have a 15-minute window once we're inside. After that, assume we're compromised. If anyone doesn't make it to the extraction point, do not wait. The mission comes first." A chorus of affirmatives echoed in my ear. We all knew the stakes. "All right," I said. "Wizard, you're up. Cut the power." For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a low hum, the lights across the compound flickered and died. Emergency generators kicked in almost immediately, but those precious seconds of darkness were all we needed. "Move!" I hissed, and we sprang into action. Johnson took point, his bulk surprisingly nimble as he navigated the fence. With practiced efficiency, he cut through the metal links, creating an opening just large enough for us to slip through. We sprinted across the open ground, using the shadows cast by the emergency lighting to our advantage. My heart pounded in my chest, adrenaline surging through my veins. "Guards approaching from your 3 o'clock, Sarah's voice crackled in our ears. 2 of them armed. Rodriguez peeled off without a word, melting into the darkness. Moments later, I heard 2 muffled thumps. "Clear," he whispered, rejoining us. We reached the side entrance, where Chen had assured us the security would be weakest. Johnson made quick work of the lock, and we slipped inside. The interior of the facility was a maze of corridors and server rooms bathed in the eerie glow of emergency lighting. We moved swiftly and silently, guided by the blueprints we had memorized. "First checkpoint ahead," Chen warned. "Bypassing security. Now." The door before us clicked open and we pushed through. So far, so good. We were halfway to our target when everything went sideways. Alarms blared to life, the sudden noise shattering the tense silence. Red warning lights began to flash, casting grotesque shadows on the walls. "Shit!" Chen's voice was panicked. "They've got a backup system I didn't account for. They know we're here." "How long until they pinpoint our location?" I demanded, already moving faster. 2 minutes, maybe less. I cursed under my breath. New plan. "Johnson, create a diversion. Make as much noise as you can on the east side of the building. Rodriguez, you're with me. We're going for the main server room." "On it, boss," Johnson replied, a hint of eagerness in his voice. He split off, heading east. Rodriguez and I double-timed it towards our objective. We could hear shouts and the pounding of feet as security mobilized to respond to the threat. "Multiple hostiles converging on your position," Sarah reported, her voice tense. "At least a dozen heavily armed." We rounded a corner and came face to face with a squad of guards. For a split second, both sides froze in surprise. Then all hell broke loose. I dove for cover as bullets whizzed past, the sound deafening in the confined space. Rodriguez returned fire, his aim true despite his injury. 2 guards went down, but more poured in to take their place. "We're pinned down," I shouted into my comm. "Chen, we need another way in." "Working on it," Chen replied, his voice strained. "There's a maintenance shaft about 20 meters to your left. It should lead you right to the server room." I relayed the information to Rodriguez. "Cover me," I yelled, then sprinted towards the shaft entrance. Bullets peppered the wall around me as I ran, but somehow I made it. I wrenched the panel open and dove in, Rodriguez hot on my heels. The shaft was cramped and dark, forcing us to crawl on our bellies. The sounds of the firefight grew distant as we inched our way forward. Finally, we reached the end. I peered through the grate and saw the server room beyond, its rows of blinking lights a beacon of hope. "We're here," I whispered. "Chen, are you ready?" "Ready and waiting. Just get me access to that main terminal." I kicked out the grate and we tumbled into the room. Rodriguez immediately took up a defensive position by the door while I made for the central console. My fingers flew over the keyboard following Chen's instructions to the letter. "Okay, you're in. Work your magic, wizard." For several tense minutes there was silence, save for the distant sound of gunfire and the clacking of keys as Chen worked remotely through my connection. "It's done," Chen finally said, his voice filled with disbelief. "The data's been uploaded. It's out there now, spreading across every secure network I could access. They can't stop it." A wave of relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. The door to the server room burst open and a flood of armed guards poured in. "Drop your weapons," they shouted, their guns trained on us. I raised my hands slowly, my mind racing. We had accomplished our mission, but at what cost? How were we going to get out of this? Just then, a familiar voice cut through the chaos. "Stand down, federal agents." My jaw dropped as I saw Director Hawthorne stride into the room, flanked by a team of agents I recognized from our own agency. "Sir?" I stammered, unable to believe my eyes. "But now we thought—" Hawthorne's face was grim, but there was a glint of pride in his eyes. "You did good, Alex. All of you. Your actions tonight have exposed a conspiracy that goes deeper than any of us imagined." As the guards lowered their weapons, confusion evident on their faces, Hawthorne continued. "The data you've released has already led to multiple high-level arrests. The organization you've been fighting? It's crumbling as we speak." I sagged against the console, the adrenaline draining from my body. "So it's over?" Hawthorne shook his head. "Not by a long shot. We've won a battle, but the war is far from over. There are still powerful people out there who will stop at nothing to maintain their grip on power." He placed a hand on my shoulder. "But thanks to you and your team, we now have a fighting chance. You've given us the ammunition we need to take this fight into the light." As the realization of what we'd accomplished sank in, I looked around at my team. Rodriguez, battered but unbowed. Johnson, grinning despite the cuts and bruises. Sarah and Chen, their voices filled with relief and triumph over the comms. We had done it. Against all odds, we had struck a blow for truth and justice. But as I met Hawthorne's gaze, I knew that our fight was far from over. This was just the beginning. "What now, sir?" I asked, straightening up. Hawthorne's expression was one of grim determination. "Now? Now we take the fight to them. Are you and your team ready for that?" I looked at Rodriguez, saw the same resolve I felt mirrored in his eyes. I thought of Sarah, Chen, and Johnson, of all we had been through together. "We're ready, sir," I said, my voice steady. "Whatever it takes." As we made our way out of the facility, no longer fugitives, but heroes of a sort, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were standing on the precipice of something much larger than ourselves. The road ahead would be dangerous, filled with challenges we couldn't yet imagine. But for the first time in weeks, I felt hope. We had struck a blow against corruption, had shone a light into the darkness, and we would continue to do so, no matter the cost. The war had only just begun, but we were ready for it. Together, we would see this through to the end. The safe house buzzed with a nervous energy. a stark contrast to the quiet suburban neighborhood outside. It had been 3 days since our raid on the server farm, and the world was still reeling from the fallout. I stood by the window, watching as an ordinary family across the street loaded groceries from their minivan, completely oblivious to the storm we had unleashed. "Alex," Sarah's voice pulled me from my thoughts. "You need to see this." I turned to find the team gathered around the television. Chen had rigged it to receive secure broadcasts, and now the screen flickered with breaking news. Oh, in a shocking turn of events, several high-ranking government officials had been taken into custody, the anchor announced, her voice taut with barely contained excitement. Sources close to the investigation claim that the arrests are linked to a massive data leak exposing a web of corruption reaching the highest levels of... "We did that," Rodriguez said softly, a mix of awe and disbelief in his voice. "We actually did that." I nodded, feeling a complex mix of pride and apprehension. "We threw the first punch, but this fight is far from over." As if on cue, my secure phone buzzed. Director Hawthorne's name flashed on the screen. "Sir?" I answered, putting the call on speaker for the team to hear. Hawthorne's voice crackled through, tense and urgent. "Alex, we've got a situation. The data you released, it's bigger than we thought. Much bigger." My stomach tightened. "What do you mean?" "We're not just dealing with corrupt officials or a shadow organization within our own government," Hawthorne explained. "This conspiracy has international reach. Foreign powers, multinational corporations, even some of our closest allies, they're all implicated." The weight of his words settled over the room like a heavy blanket. We had known our actions would have consequences, but this... "What's our next move, sir?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "We're calling in everyone we can trust. I need you and your team at HQ in 1 hour. We're going to war, Alex. For real this time." The line went dead, leaving us in stunned silence. Johnson was the first to speak. "Well, shit. Looks like our little data dump just started World War III. "Not helping, Johnson," Sarah snapped, but I could hear the fear underlying her irritation. I took a deep breath, centering myself. "All right, people, you heard the man. Gear up, we move in 10. As the team scrambled to prepare, I pulled Sarah aside. "I need you to reach out to your contacts, anyone you trust implicitly. We're going to need all the allies we can get." She nodded, her eyes meeting mine. For a moment, I saw a flicker of the same fear and uncertainty I felt, but then her jaw set, determination replacing doubt. "I'm on it." The drive to HQ was tense, each of us lost in our own thoughts. The streets seemed different somehow, as if the weight of our knowledge had altered the very fabric of reality. Ordinary people going about their lives, unaware that their world was about to change irrevocably. As we pulled into the underground parking garage, I noticed something off. "It's too quiet," I muttered, my hand instinctively moving to my weapon. Rodriguez nodded, his eyes scanning our surroundings. No guards at the checkpoint either. We exited the vehicle cautiously, every sense on high alert. The elevator ride to the command center was excruciating, each floor bringing us closer to... What? The doors slid open and chaos greeted us. The command center was a hive of frantic activity. Agents rushed back and forth, shouting orders and relaying information. Screens lining the walls flashed with news reports from around the globe, each one more alarming than the last. Director Hawthorne stood at the center of the storm, barking orders and coordinating responses. When he saw us, relief washed over his face. "Thank God you're here," he said, ushering us into a side room. "We're in the middle of a shitstorm like you wouldn't believe." "What's happening, sir?" I asked, trying to make sense of the madness. Hawthorne ran a hand over his face, suddenly looking every one of his years. "The data you released, it's causing governments to collapse. Financial markets are in free fall. And that's just the beginning." He pointed to a map on the wall, covered in red markers. "These are confirmed sightings of known operatives from the organization we've been fighting. They're mobilizing, Alex. Whatever their endgame is, it's happening now. What do they want? Chen asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Hawthorne's eyes met mine, and I saw real fear there. Control. Absolute and total. The chaos we're seeing, it's not a byproduct of our actions. It's what they wanted all along. The realization hit me like a physical blow. We hadn't foiled their plans. We'd played right into them. So what do we do? Sarah asked, voicing the question on all our minds. Hawthorne's expression hardened. We fight back. With everything we've got. He turned to Chen. I need you to dive back into that data. Find us something we can use. A weakness. Anything. Chen nodded, already pulling out his laptop. Johnson, Rodriguez, Hawthorne continued, I'm putting you in charge of our tactical response. We've got loyal agents scattered across the globe. Coordinate them. Get them where they need to be. Yes, sir, they replied in unison, moving to a nearby console. Sarah, I need your network. Reach out to every contact you have. We need intel, and we need it yesterday. Sarah nodded grimly, pulling out her phone. Finally, Hawthorne turned to me. Alex, you're with me. We're going to meet with what's left of the Joint Chiefs. We need to convince them of the threat we're facing before it's too late. As we prepared to leave, a young agent burst into the room, his face pale. Sir, you need to see this. We rushed back into the main command center. Every screen was now showing the same image. A man in a crisp suit, his face hidden in shadow, standing behind a podium. My fellow citizens of the world, the figure began, his voice distorted but commanding. You have been lied to. Your governments, your institutions, everything you believed in. It's all been a carefully constructed illusion. I felt a chill run down my spine as I recognized the voice. Jenkins. He was alive. But now, thanks to the actions of a few misguided individuals, that illusion has been shattered. Jenkins continued. You stand on the brink of chaos, of a world without order. But I offer you a choice. Embrace the new world order we offer, or descend into anarchy. The screens flickered, showing scenes of riots, of military forces mobilizing, of world leaders being led away in handcuffs. The old world is dying, Jenkins declared. Join us in building a new one, a world of true order, true purpose. The choice is yours. The broadcast cut off, leaving us in stunned silence. My God, Hawthorne whispered. It's already started. I looked around at my team, saw the same mix of determination and fear I felt reflected in their eyes. We had set this in motion, however unwittingly. Now it was up to us to stop it. Sir, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. What are your orders? Hawthorne straightened, his jaw set. We do what we've always done, Alex. We fight. Not just for our country now, but for the very future of human freedom. As the command center erupted into renewed activity, I felt the weight of the world settling on our shoulders. We had wanted to expose the truth, to fight corruption. Instead, we had triggered a global crisis that threatened the very foundations of society. But as I looked at my team, at the determined faces of the agents around us, I felt a glimmer of hope. We had started this, and come hell or high water, we would finish it. The real war had begun, and we were the last line of defense. The helicopter's blades sliced through the night air as we approached our destination. Below us, Washington, D.C. was a sea of chaos. Fires dotted the landscape, sirens wailed incessantly, and the streets were filled with a mix of panicked civilians and mobilizing military units. I gripped the flash drive in my pocket, the weight of its contents feeling heavier than ever. We had started this with the best intentions, but now the world was burning because of us. ETA 2 minutes, the pilot's voice crackled through our headsets. Director Hawthorne nodded, his face a mask of grim determination. Remember, people, we get in, we present our case, and we pray to God they listen. The fate of the free world depends on this meeting. I looked around at my team. Sarah's eyes were fixed on the city below, her expression unreadable. Chen was furiously typing on his laptop, likely sifting through the data one last time for any crucial details we might have missed. Rodriguez and Johnson sat in tense silence, weapons at the ready. As we touched down on the White House lawn, I couldn't shake the surreal feeling of it all. Just days ago, we were fugitives. Now we were walking into the heart of American power, potentially the last hope for democracy. Secret Service agents met us as we disembarked, their faces taut with stress. "This way," one of them barked, leading us towards the West Wing. The interior of the White House was a hive of frantic activity. Staff members rushed back and forth, phones rang incessantly, and the air was thick with tension. We were ushered into the Situation Room where the remnants of the nation's leadership awaited us. The president looked haggard, his tie loosened and dark circles under his eyes. The Joint Chiefs, or what was left of them, sat around the table, their faces grim. "Director Hawthorne," the president acknowledged, his voice hoarse, "I hope you have some good news for us. Because right now, it feels like the world is ending." Hawthorne stepped forward. "Mr. President, members of the Joint Chiefs, what I'm about to tell you will sound impossible, even insane. But I assure you, every word is true." For the next hour, we laid out everything we knew. The shadow organization, their infiltration of governments worldwide, the carefully orchestrated chaos designed to usher in a new world order. I watched as disbelief turned to horror on the faces of the most powerful people in the country. This is beyond anything we could have imagined," the Secretary of Defense muttered, his face ashen. "How do we know this isn't some elaborate hoax?" one of the Joint Chiefs demanded. "For all we know, you could be part of this conspiracy." I stepped forward, my heart pounding. "Sir, with all due respect, if we were part of this conspiracy, we wouldn't be here. We'd be out there, taking advantage of the chaos. Instead, we're offering you a chance to fight back." The room fell silent, all eyes on me. I took a deep breath and continued. "We have names, dates, locations. We have proof of their operations, their long-term plans. But more importantly, we have a way to stop them." Chen spoke up, his voice steady despite the pressure. "Their strength lies in their ability to control information. But we can use that against them. I've developed a program that can track their communications, predict their moves. If we act fast, we can stay one step ahead." The president leaned forward, his eyes intense. "And what exactly are you proposing?" Hawthorne laid out our plan. A coordinated global strike against key members of the organization, coupled with a massive information dump to expose their operations to the world. It was risky, potentially catastrophic if it went wrong, but it was the only chance we had. As the leadership debated, I felt a tap on my shoulder. Sarah gestured for me to follow her out of the room. In the hallway, her face was tight with worry. "Alex, I just heard from one of my contacts. Jenkins is on the move. He's headed to a compound in the Swiss Alps. Whatever their endgame is, it's happening there." My mind raced. "We need to go. Now." "Go where?" Rodriguez asked, joining us with Johnson and Chen in tow. I looked at my team, the people I'd been through hell and back with. "Switzerland. We're going to end this once and for all." Chen's eyes widened. "But what about the plan, the coordinated strike?" "We'll let Hawthorne handle that," I said, my resolve strengthening. "But Jenkins is the key to all of this. If we can take him out, we might just be able to cut the head off the snake." Johnson grinned, a predatory gleam in his eye. "Now you're talking my language, boss." We quickly gathered our gear and headed for the exit. As we reached the door, I heard Hawthorne's voice behind us. "And where do you think you're going?" We turned to find the director standing there, his eyebrow raised. "Sir," I began, but he cut me off. "Save it, Alex, I know that look. You're going after Jenkins, aren't you?" I nodded, bracing for an argument. Instead, Hawthorne surprised me. "Good, because I'm coming with you." Before I could protest, he held up a hand. "This started with us, it needs to end with us." I've briefed the president. He'll coordinate the global response from here. Our job is to take out Jenkins and dismantle their command structure. As we boarded a waiting transport plane, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were hurtling towards our final confrontation. The stakes had never been higher, the danger never more real. The flight to Switzerland was tense, each of us lost in our own thoughts. I found myself staring out the window, watching as the world passed beneath us. Somewhere down there, people were fighting, dying, struggling to make sense of a world turned upside down. And it was all because of the choices we had made. Sarah's hand found mine, squeezing gently. "We're going to make this right, Alex," she said softly. "Whatever it takes." I nodded, grateful for her presence, for all of them. We had started this journey as colleagues, become fugitives together, and now we were something more. A family, forged in the crucible of crisis. As we began our descent into Swiss airspace, Hawthorne gathered us for a final briefing. According to our intel, Jenkins is holed up in a fortress disguised as a ski resort, he explained, pointing to a map. It's heavily guarded with state-of-the-art security systems. Getting in won't be easy. "When is it ever?" Rodriguez quipped, checking his weapon. Hawthorne ignored him, continuing. "Our primary objective is Jenkins. Capture if possible, but if not, take him out. Whatever it takes to stop their plans." Chen raised his hand tentatively. "And what about their systems? If we can access their mainframe, I might be able to shut down their entire network." Hawthorne nodded. "Good thinking. Chen, you and Sarah will focus on that. The rest of us will go after Jenkins." As we geared up for the insertion, I felt a mix of fear and determination coursing through me. This was it, the culmination of everything we'd been through. One way or another, it would end here. The pilot's voice came over the intercom. 2 minutes to drop zone. Get ready." We moved to the rear of the plane, the cargo bay door lowering to reveal the snow-capped peaks below. The wind howled, bitterly cold, a reminder of the harsh environment we were about to enter. I looked at my team one last time. "Whatever happens down there, I want you all to know, it's been an honor." They nodded, a silent understanding passing between us. We were more than a team now. We were a family, united in our mission to save a world on the brink of collapse. "Go time," Hawthorne called out. And with that, we leapt into the void, plummeting towards our final confrontation. As the wind rushed past me, I steeled myself for what was to come. Jenkins, the organization, the fate of the world, it all waited below. One way or another, this would be our last mission, and I was determined to see it through, no matter the cost. The icy wind bit into my face as we descended towards the snow-covered landscape. The parachute deployment jerked me upwards, and I guided myself towards the designated landing zone, a small clearing just outside the perimeter of Jenkins's fortress. One by one, our team touched down, quickly discarding our chutes and regrouping. The imposing structure loomed before us, its sleek modern design at odds with the rugged alpine setting. From the outside, it could pass for an exclusive ski resort, but we knew better. This was the heart of the enemy's operation. "Comms check," I whispered into my mic. A chorus of affirmatives came back. We were all here, all ready. Hawthorne pulled out a tablet, bringing up a 3D schematic of the building. "Remember the plan. Chen, Sarah, you're our eyes and ears. Find that server room and shut down their network. The rest of us are going for Jenkins." Chen nodded, his face a mask of determination. "We'll get it done, sir." "Be careful in there," I said, meeting Sarah's eyes. There was so much I wanted to say, but this wasn't the time. She seemed to understand, giving me a small nod. "All right, people," Hawthorne said, his voice grim. "This is it. The fate of the world rests on what we do here today. Let's make it count." We moved out, the snow crunching beneath our feet. As we approached the perimeter, I signaled for everyone to halt. Ahead, 2 guards patrolled the fence line, their breath visible in the cold air. Johnson grinned, pulling out a small device. "I've got this," he whispered. He aimed the device at the guards and pressed a button. A high-pitched whine filled the air, and the guards suddenly clutched their heads, their earpieces obviously feeding back painfully. In seconds they were on the ground, unconscious. "Nice work," Rodriguez murmured, as we dragged the guards into the cover of some bushes. We breached the perimeter, moving swiftly across the open ground to the building service entrance. Chen made quick work of the electronic lock, and we slipped inside. The interior was a stark contrast to the rustic exterior, all sleek metal and glass, humming with advanced technology. We split up, Sarah and Chen heading for the lower levels where the server room was likely located, while the rest of us made our way towards the upper floors. As we climbed, the sense of wrongness grew. "It's too quiet," I muttered. "Where is everyone?" Hawthorne's face was grim. "They're expecting us." No sooner had the words left his mouth than alarms began blaring. Red emergency lights bathed the corridor in an eerie glow. "So much for the element of surprise," Rodriguez growled, readying his weapon. We pushed forward, encountering our first resistance at the next junction. A group of armed guards opened fire, forcing us to take cover. "Johnson, Rodriguez, suppressing fire," I shouted. "Director, with me." As my team laid down cover fire, Hawthorne and I flanked the enemy position. In a matter of seconds, it was over. "Chen, Sarah, status report," I barked into my comm as we moved past the fallen guards. "We're in the server room." Sarah's voice came back, tense but steady. "Chen's working on breaching their systems now. But Alex, something's not right. This feels too easy." I shared a look with Hawthorne. He nodded, understanding my unspoken concern. "Stay alert," I told Sarah. "We're heading for the top floor. That's got to be where Jenkins is." As we ascended, the resistance grew fiercer. We fought our way through corridors and up staircases, the bodies of enemy combatants left in our wake. But Sarah was right. Something felt off. It was as if we were being funneled towards a specific destination. Finally, we reached a set of ornate double doors. Beyond them, I knew, we would find Jenkins. "This is it," Hawthorne said, his voice low. "Whatever happens in there, it's been an honor serving with you all." We nodded, a moment of silent understanding passing between us. Then, with a deep breath, I kicked open the doors. The room beyond was vast, a panoramic view of the Alps visible through floor-to-ceiling windows. And there, standing calmly behind a desk, was Jenkins. "Ah, Alex," he said, his voice as smooth and paternal as I remembered. "I've been expecting you." "It's over, Jenkins," I growled, my weapon trained on him. "Your network is about to go dark. Your operatives are being rounded up worldwide. Surrender now." Jenkins smiled, the expression never reaching his eyes. "Oh, Alex, still so naive. Do you really think I'd let you get this far if it wasn't part of the plan?" A chill ran down my spine. Before I could respond, Chen's panicked voice came through the comm. "Alex, it's a trap. The data, it's not—" His words cut off in a burst of static. "Chen? Sarah?" I called, but there was no response. Jenkins chuckled. "Your friends are fine, for now. But I'm afraid they've outlived their usefulness, as have you." Suddenly, the floor beneath us shuddered. The windows behind Jenkins went dark, and I realized with horror that they weren't windows at all, but screens. The entire room shuddered, and I felt a sensation of movement. "What have you done?" Hawthorne demanded. Jenkins spread his arms wide. "Welcome to the future, gentlemen. This entire facility is a launch vehicle. Right now, we're ascending to the edge of the atmosphere. From there, we'll have an unassailable position to reshape the world below." "You're insane," I spat. "We'll stop you." "Will you?" Jenkins asked, his voice maddeningly calm. "Look around you, Alex. The chaos, the destruction. It's all part of the plan. The old world needs to burn before the new one can rise from its ashes. And you, my dear boy, you've played your part perfectly." The realization hit me like a physical blow. We hadn't been fighting the conspiracy. We'd been unwitting pawns in its grand design. Why? I asked, my voice hoarse. Why all of this? Jenkins' eyes gleamed with a fervent light. Because humanity needs guidance, Alex. Left to their own devices, they destroy themselves, destroy their world. We're offering salvation, order, purpose. At the cost of freedom, Hawthorne growled. A small price to pay for the survival of our species, Jenkins countered. I felt the weight of the world pressing down on me. Everything we'd done, every sacrifice we'd made, had it all been for nothing? No. I refused to believe that. You're wrong, Jenkins, I said, my resolve hardening. Humanity isn't perfect, but we don't need your twisted version of salvation. We'll find our own way, make our own choices. That's what makes us human. Jenkins sighed, looking genuinely disappointed. I had hoped you'd understand, Alex, that you'd join us, but I see now that was foolish. You're too much like your father. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. What do you know about my father? A sad smile played across Jenkins's lips. He stood where you're standing now, years ago. Made the same choice you're about to make. It cost him his life. My mind reeled. My father's death had been ruled an accident. Had he actually died trying to stop this madness? Jenkins reached for something on his desk. I'm truly sorry it has to end this way, Alex. But the future waits for no one. Time seemed to slow. I saw Jenkins's hand close around what could only be a weapon. I saw Hawthorne moving to shield me. I heard Rodriguez and Johnson shouting. And in that moment, I made my choice. I lunged forward, crossing the distance between us in a heartbeat. Jenkins's eyes widened in surprise as I tackled him, sending us both crashing through the false window behind him. As we fell, I caught a glimpse of the world outside, the curvature of the earth, the thin blue line of the atmosphere. It was beautiful and terrifying all at once. Jenkins struggled in my grasp, his face a mask of fury and fear. You fool! He shouted over the roar of the wind. You've doomed us all! I held on tighter, a grim smile on my face. No, Jenkins, I've saved us. As we plummeted back to Earth, I closed my eyes thinking of my team, of Sarah, of all we'd fought for. Whatever happened next, I knew we'd given humanity a chance to choose its own destiny, free from the shadowy manipulations of men like Jenkins. The last thing I heard before the world went dark was the sound of explosions above us. My team, finishing the job, destroying the facility and all its secrets. We had won, but as the ground rushed up to meet us, I wondered at what cost. The story wasn't over, not by a long shot. But this chapter at least was coming to a close. And whatever came next, I knew one thing for certain. The world would never be the same again. The steady beep of medical equipment was the first thing I became aware of as consciousness slowly returned. My eyelids felt heavy, refusing to open at first. When I finally managed to pry them apart, I was greeted by the stark white ceiling of what was clearly a hospital room. He's awake. I heard Sarah's voice filled with relief and something else I couldn't quite place. Suddenly, faces swam into view. Sarah, her eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep. Chen, sporting a bandage on his forehead but grinning widely. Rodriguez and Johnson, looking battered but alive. Welcome back to the land of the living, boss, Johnson quipped, but I could hear the emotion underlying his usual bravado. I tried to speak, but my throat was dry, my voice coming out as a rasp. Sarah quickly held a cup of water to my lips and I drank gratefully. What happened? I managed to croak out. The team exchanged glances, a silent conversation passing between them. Finally, Sarah spoke. You've been out for 2 weeks, Alex, after you and Jenkins fell. Her voice caught, and she took a moment to compose herself. We thought we'd lost you, but somehow you survived the fall. A parachute on the facility deployed automatically during the descent. You were badly injured, but alive. And Jenkins? I asked, already suspecting the answer. Rodriguez's face hardened. Dead. They found his body about a mile from where they recovered you. I closed my eyes, a mix of emotions washing over me. Relief that it was over, guilt at the loss of life, even Jenkins, and a bone-deep weariness. "The facility?" I asked, opening my eyes again. "Destroyed," Chen replied. "We managed to download most of their data before blowing it sky high. The intelligence agencies of the world are having a field day with it." I nodded, wincing at the pain the movement caused. "And the world?" The room fell silent for a moment. It was Hawthorne who answered, stepping into view. I hadn't even realized he was in the room. "It's complicated," he said, his face etched with new lines of worry. "The exposure of the conspiracy has sent shockwaves through every level of society. Governments are in turmoil, financial markets are unstable, and people are scared and angry." He paused, a grim smile touching his lips. "But they're free. Free to choose their own path forward. You gave them that chance, Alex." I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. It wasn't a perfect outcome, but it was something. A chance for humanity to forge its own destiny. "There's something else you should know," Sarah said, her voice hesitant. She reached for a remote and turned on the TV mounted on the wall. The screen flickered to life, showing what appeared to be a press conference. My jaw dropped as I recognized the figure standing at the podium. It was me. "What the hell?" I muttered, looking to my team for explanation. "It's not you," Chen said quickly. "It's an AI-generated deepfake. After the facility was destroyed and Jenkins was confirmed dead, someone started broadcasting these messages worldwide." I watched in stunned silence as my digital doppelganger spoke. "Citizens of the world, I come to you not as a hero or a leader, but as a fellow human being who has seen behind the curtain of power. The conspiracy we exposed was real, and its tendrils ran deeper than any of us could have imagined. But in destroying it, we have not solved all of our problems. We have merely given ourselves the opportunity to face them head-on, without manipulation or hidden agendas." The fake me paused, its expression earnest and determined. "The road ahead will not be easy. We face challenges that will test the very fabric of our societies. Climate change, economic inequality, technological disruption. These are problems that cannot be solved by any one nation or group. They require global cooperation and a fundamental reimagining of how we live and work together. I do not have all the answers. No one does. But I believe in the ingenuity and resilience of the human spirit. Together we can build a world that is more just, more sustainable, and more free than anything we have known before. The choice is ours. What kind of future will we create?" The broadcast ended, leaving the room in silence. "Who's behind this?" I asked, my mind reeling. Hawthorne shook his head. "We don't know. Our best analysts haven't been able to trace the source. Whoever it is, they're using the chaos and your newfound status as a symbol of resistance to push for global reforms." I leaned back, trying to process it all. "So what happens now?" "Now," Hawthorne said, his voice taking on a note of determination, "we get to work. The world is at a crossroads, Alex. The old power structures are crumbling, but what replaces them is still up for grabs. We need to ensure that whatever comes next is better than what came before." I nodded slowly, wincing at the pain. "And you want us to be part of that?" "You're already part of it," Sarah said softly. "Like it or not, you've become a symbol. People are looking to you, to us, for guidance." The weight of responsibility settled over me like a physical thing. We had started this journey trying to expose the truth, and now we found ourselves at the center of a global movement for change. "I don't know if I'm ready for this," I admitted, looking at each member of my team in turn. Rodriguez chuckled. "Were any of us ready for what we've been through? We'll figure it out together, boss. Like we always do." As if on cue, Chen's tablet began beeping urgently. He glanced at it, his eyes widening. Guys? We've got a situation developing. There's a massive protest forming outside the United Nations headquarters in New York. They're calling for a complete overhaul of the global governance system. Hawthorne straightened, immediately back in director mode. We need to get ahead of this. If the protests turn violent, it could spark a chain reaction worldwide. I started to sit up, ignoring the pain that shot through my body. Then let's go. The world isn't going to fix itself. Sarah put a hand on my shoulder, gently but firmly pushing me back down. Oh no, you don't. You're not going anywhere until the doctors clear you. I opened my mouth to protest, but the look in her eyes stopped me. There was worry there, yes, but also something else. Something that made my heart skip a beat. Fine, I conceded. But I'm not sitting this out entirely. Get me a secure line to the UN. If we're going to shape the future, we might as well start now. As the team sprang into action, I couldn't help but feel a mix of trepidation and excitement. We had torn down the old world order, exposed the lies and manipulation that had shaped our society for generations. Now came the hard part, building something better in its place. The road ahead would be challenging, fraught with dangers both old and new. But as I looked at my team, my family, I knew we were ready to face whatever came next. Together. All right, I said, my voice stronger now. Let's change the world. For real this time. As Sarah began setting up the secure line and the others gathered around to plan our next move, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of an even greater adventure. We had saved the world from the shadows. Now it was time to step into the light and help shape its future. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever obstacles we would face, one thing was certain. The world would never be the same again, and neither would we. The phoenix was rising from the ashes of the old world. It was up to us to ensure it soared. 6 months had passed since that fateful day in the hospital room. The world had changed in ways we could never have imagined, and we found ourselves at the center of it all. I stood at the window of our new headquarters, a repurposed skyscraper in the heart of New York City. Below, the streets teemed with people going about their daily lives, but there was a palpable energy in the air, a sense of purpose and hope that hadn't existed before. Alex, Sarah's voice pulled me from my thoughts. The UN Security Council is ready for our briefing. I nodded, straightening my tie. It still felt strange, wearing a suit instead of tactical gear. But this was our battlefield now. Conference rooms and public forums, fighting with words and ideas instead of bullets. As we walked to the conference room, I couldn't help but marvel at how far we'd come. Our team, once a small group of rogue agents, had evolved into the nucleus of a global reform movement. The Phoenix Initiative, they called us, rising from the ashes of the old world to help build a new one. We entered the conference room, where the rest of our core team was already assembled. Chen, our tech guru, now headed a global task force on cybersecurity and digital rights. Rodriguez had become our liaison with various international law enforcement agencies, working to root out the remnants of the conspiracy. Johnson, surprisingly, had taken to diplomacy like a fish to water, using his unique blend of charm and intimidation to broker agreements between fractious nations. And Hawthorne, well, the old spymaster had found a new calling as our strategic advisor, his years of experience proving invaluable in navigating the treacherous waters of global politics. All right, people, I said, taking my place at the head of the table. What's our status? Chen spoke up first, his fingers dancing across his tablet. The implementation of the Global Information Network is proceeding on schedule. We've got 70% of the world's nations on board, with more joining every day. It's not perfect, but it's a huge step towards the kind of transparency and accountability we've been pushing for. I nodded, remembering the heated debates that had surrounded the Jinn. It was a revolutionary concept, a decentralized, blockchain-based system that would make government operations and corporate dealings visible to all. No more backroom deals, no more hidden agendas. Any pushback? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Rodriguez grimaced. Some. There's been an uptick in cyber attacks against the system, and we've uncovered a few plots to sabotage key nodes, but nothing we can't handle. Good, I said. Sarah, how are we looking on the economic front? Sarah pulled up a series of graphs on the main screen. The transition to the new economic model is challenging, but progressing. We're seeing significant resistance from some of the major corporations and financial institutions, but public support for the reforms remains high. I studied the data, feeling a mix of pride and concern. The new economic system we'd helped design, a hybrid model that balanced free market principles with strong social safety nets and environmental protections, was ambitious, to say the least. But it was necessary if we wanted to address the systemic inequalities that had plagued the old world. "And the Environmental Restoration Project?" I asked, turning to Johnson. He grinned, clearly proud of his pet project. "It's a hit, boss. We've got volunteers from every corner of the globe signing up. The first wave of reforestation and ocean cleanup efforts are already showing promising results." I allowed myself a small smile. It was good to hear some unambiguously positive news for a change. "All right," I said, taking a deep breath. "Let's go over our talking points for the Security Council. We need to—" I was cut off by a sudden commotion outside the conference room. Before any of us could react, the door burst open and a young aide rushed in, her face pale. "Sir," she gasped, struggling to catch her breath. "You need to see this." She fumbled with a remote, turning on the large screen that dominated one wall of the room. The image that appeared made my blood run cold. It was Jenkins. Not the real Jenkins. We'd confirmed his death beyond any doubt. This was another deepfake, like the ones that had been appearing sporadically since our victory at the Alpine facility. But this one was different. More polished. More real. "Greetings, citizens of the world," the digital Jenkins said, his voice smooth and confident. "I hope you've enjoyed your little taste of chaos and false freedom. But playtime is over now. It's time for the adults to take charge again." The room erupted into a flurry of activity. Chen was already at his computer trying to trace the broadcast. Rodriguez was on the phone, presumably alerting our security teams, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from the screen. "You thought you'd won," Jenkins continued, a smug smile playing across his lips. "You thought you'd destroyed us. But we are an idea, and ideas are bulletproof. We've been watching, waiting, as you fumbled your way through your misguided attempts at reform. And now we're ready to show you what true order looks like." The image changed, showing a series of locations around the world. Major cities, key infrastructure sites, seats of government. In each one, chaos was erupting. Explosions, riots, systems going haywire. "This is just a taste," Jenkins's voice intoned over the footage. "A demonstration of what awaits if you continue down this path of misguided idealism. But it's not too late. Surrender control to us, and we will restore order. Resist, and watch your new world burn." The broadcast cut off abruptly, leaving us in stunned silence. "Chen," I said, my voice tight, "tell me you traced that." He shook his head, frustration evident on his face. "They're good, Alex. Really good. The signal was bouncing through servers all over the world. It'll take time to unravel it all." I slammed my fist on the table, startling everyone. "Time we don't have. You saw what's happening out there. If we don't get ahead of this fast, everything we've worked for could unravel." Sarah placed a hand on my arm, her touch calming me slightly. "We knew this was a possibility, Alex. We've prepared for it." I took a deep breath, forcing myself to think rationally. She was right, of course. We'd always known that remnants of the old conspiracy might resurface. We'd put contingencies in place, but the scale of this attack, it was beyond anything we'd anticipated. "All right," I said, my mind racing. "Johnson, get on the horn with our contacts in every major government. I want a full assessment of the damage and coordinated response plans within the hour. Rodriguez, mobilize our security teams. I want our key personnel and infrastructure protected at all costs. Chen, forget the UN briefing. Your priority now is tracking down the source of that broadcast. Sarah, you're with me. We need to address the public before panic sets in." As the team sprang into action, I felt a familiar mix of dread and determination settling over me. We'd fought so hard to build this new world, to give humanity a chance at a better future. And now, it was all hanging by a thread. But as I looked around at my team, my family, I knew we weren't going down without a fight. We'd faced impossible odds before and come out on top. We could do it again. "One more thing," I said as we prepared to leave the room. "Whatever happens, remember why we're doing this. It's not about us. It's about them." I gestured to the window, to the city beyond. "It's about giving them a chance at a world without shadows, without manipulation. A world where they can choose their own destiny." Sarah squeezed my hand, a fierce determination in her eyes. "We'll win, Alex, we have to." As we stepped out to face the storm, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was it. The final battle between the old world and the new. Everything we'd fought for, everything we'd sacrificed, it all came down to this moment. The Phoenix was under attack, but this time, we were ready. This time, we would make sure it rose higher than ever before. The war for the future of humanity had entered its final phase, and we intended to win.